It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On NFL Trade Deadline Special. I'm your host, Daniela Bruce, and next to me, our Locked On NFL insider, former Super Bowl champion, Isaiah. Stand back over the next 2 hours. Isaiah and I are going to get you all the reaction to the latest on the latest trades from our group of Locked On insiders across the NFL. Plus, we'll have a full second half of the season preview. Is with Derrick Henry injured, is a quarterback the only option for MVP? That's a question we're going to talk about. Are the Cardinals in a class of their own this season? Which teams will have a second half surge? We'll tap into all of that coming up shortly. But first, Isaiah, welcome. Excited to be hosting this show with you today. There's a lot to talk about. A very exciting day in the NFL.
Absolutely. There's a lot going on. I'm glad to be here. We have the whole squad with us today. Let's go ahead and get to it.
Yeah, well, first for you, what is this day like as a player? I can imagine it comes with some nerves and anxiety, especially if your name is being thrown around in trade rumors.
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, I've never been in those trade talks, so that's a good thing. But on the other side of it, I would say 90% of the team is safe for the most part right now. This is the day where the teams are calling. Most of the time, these calls really take place before today. Today is like the absolute deadline, right? So most teams already have it figured out in terms of whether deals are going to come through or not. There may be some last minute things that take place, but weeks ago, teams have circled on their rosters in terms of guys that are going to be on the edge or guys that they might want to get rid of, whether it be a lack of production, whether it be their inability to sign them next year, or they just don't have plans of them going forward. This is the time of the year where teams have to figure out exactly what chess pieces are going to help them either go further this year, or they got to start preparing for the future.
Isaiah, we have seen some moves already leading up to today's 4 p.m. deadline. Yesterday kicked things off with a shock out of Denver. Here is the initial reaction.
Los Angeles Rams are finalizing a trade for superstar pass rusher Von Miller ahead of Tuesday's trade deadline. I'm Sosa Cremenges, your host of the Locked On Rams podcast. This is massive news. I mean, the Rams are all in, pushing all their chips into the middle of the table. They're trading a second and third round pick in exchange for the 8-time Pro Bowl talent. This is massive news for a defense that just has not played that great this season. They've been okay, but now you pair Von Miller with the best defensive tackle, the best player in football in Aaron Donald, arguably the best or second best player on defense in Jalen Ramsey. This team is all in. This defense is going to be better moving forward. You can't really double team Aaron Donald now as much with Von Miller opposite of him. Leonard Floyd, some of these other names up front. Raheem Morris's defense just got a lot better. The Rams just improved their chances to go to a Super Bowl. This team has no bounds. General Manager Les Snead finding another way to improve this roster. To find out what this means for this defense, the Rams, and their chances moving forward, listen to the Locked On Rams podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Isaiah, just how much does this improve the Rams' chances of going to a Super Bowl?
Drastically. You're talking about an organization that has done everything they can over this last year to position themselves for a run at this Super Bowl title with the big trade for Matthew Stafford this year. And now, in addition to that, right now you add Von Miller, the 10-year veteran who has 110 and a half sacks over his career. He has 4.5 sacks this year. This man is a complete boss hog. And you're pairing him up with guys of the likes of Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Darius Williams. This defense just got better. These guys currently are 14th in the league in defense, so right there in the middle of the road. But on the offensive side of things, they're the 5th ranked offense. So if you take this defense and you improve them, now all of a sudden you have 2 top 5 ranked offensive defensive sides of the ball. Makes for a great team going forward towards the playoffs.
The interesting side of this, Isaiah, is that the Rams give up a second and a third round pick in 2022, which means they now don't have a first, a second, or a third. So they really are going all in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think the Rams are too concerned about their future right now. And, this is definitely one way of going about it. Some teams plan for the future, and the future is always going to be that, right? We're always looking forward to the future. But at some point in time, teams have to decide that the future is now. And when you recognize that you have a team as good as these guys are, with a division that's as competitive as it is, and in a conference that's as competitive as it is here in the NFC this year, you have to do everything that you can to make sure that you have the pieces required, the personnel required to go out there and give yourself the best chance to win football games, win playoff games, and ultimately win the Super Bowl.
And that's why the Rams are probably number one in our power rankings this week, Isaiah, which we will talk about more later in the show. Earlier today, we saw some news between the Steelers and the Chiefs. They got in the trade mix. Here's Locked On Steelers.
Carter from the Locked On Steelers podcast with your Locked On Now update. We're recording from the Wild here from Pitt's training facility because, hey, we got to do things on the go. But we got big breaking news. The Pittsburgh Steelers have traded Melvin Ingram to the Kansas City Chiefs for a 6th-round pick. Melvin Ingram, of course, all the stories leaking out last week that he wanted to leave Pittsburgh. He didn't like how he was being used, despite him saying when he came into Pittsburgh that he was happy to be used however he could be. This is a move the Steelers apparently had to make because you can't keep a disgruntled veteran around who doesn't want to be with the team because he's upset with something. It can mess up the team chemistry. We talked about that with Tony Serino with on the Pittsburgh Steelers on the Tuesday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Go back and listen to that if you get a chance. But this move now puts Taco Charlton and Tuxa as the top edge rushers to back up TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, leaving that position very thin. We'll talk more about that on the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast.
Isaiah, the Chiefs have been underperforming, to say the least. What does the addition of Melvin Ingram, do for them?
This is a big pickup for them. And the fact that they got him for a 6th-round pick is absolutely everything for them. They didn't have to give up much, and they got a 9-year veteran who has 50 sacks. And now you add him to a defense that's ranked 28th in the league. He's going to improve these guys, and he's going to improve them now. These guys need a lot of help. Offensively, they're not concerned, even though they're struggling a little bit. They have a lot of new pieces in terms of the offensive line. They will figure things out offensively, but defensively, they needed a spark. They needed somebody to come in and add some depth. So now you add him to Frank Clark, you add him to Chris Jones and these guys up front. And now that all of a sudden, hopefully this defensive front can start getting some pressure, start forcing some turnovers and get the ball back in the hands of Patrick Mahomes and that offense.
Isaiah, I know last time I talked to you about the Chiefs, you said you weren't worried, and we just heard you say you think they're going to figure it out offensively. You're still not worried after last night's Monday Night Football game?
I'm not. The reason being, as long as you have the personnel, and as long as you have a healthy team, you're always in a position for the light switch to turn on. We've seen what these guys are capable of. This isn't a team that's full of just talent and potential talent that hasn't come to fruition yet. We've seen what these guys are capable of. We've seen these guys go out and win championships. We've seen these guys obviously play amazingly well together and have the most explosive offense arguably in history. So when you're talking about a team like that has savvy veterans on it, the guys that have that expectation of themselves already, sometimes you just play bad. Sometimes it's just a bad run for you. It's no different than in baseball if you're just having a bad run at hitting the ball. At some point in time, you're going to hit in that one play, and all of a sudden you get your mojo back, you get your confidence back, and that's going to happen at some point in time. I don't think anybody has any questions about that offensively, but defensively, there was a lot of question marks, and this is one of the answers for that.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep our eye on the Chiefs as we move forward in the second half of the NFL season. The latest breaking news out of Houston, and no, it's not exactly what you guys were expecting.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I am Cody Davis, one half of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And ladies and gentlemen, the Houston Texans have just traded Charles Omenihu to the San Francisco 49ers in exchange for a future draft pick. Now, I know some people might be disappointed because we all, including myself, thought that Charles Omenihu could be the future of the Texans defensive line. However, he kind of struggled to find his niche in the Texans 4-3 defense. Plus, with him getting 2 healthy scratches in back-to-back weeks, there was starting to be some growing discontent between him and his organization. Now, Omenihu has an opportunity to finally come close to reaching his potential in San Francisco. The 49ers, they have picked up a tremendous pass rusher that can really help improve their defensive line. And look, the Houston Texans, this move actually gives them an opportunity to continue developing some of their younger guys, especially Jonathan Grenard, who is currently leading the team in sacks with 6 on the season. And as we continue to sit here on this NFL trade deadline day to see whether or not the Houston Texans move on from DeShaun Watson, this was their first move of the day by sending Omenihu to the San Francisco 49ers. For more information on your favorite football team in the Houston Texans, please be sure to check out Locked On Texans for everything regarding this NFL trade deadline.
Isaiah Omenihu to San Fran. What's your reaction to the trade, and how much better does San Francisco get with this?
Not a huge reaction. I think 49ers, they do get better. Obviously, you obviously add, we just talked about the NFC and how competitive this is, especially in the NFC West. But you add another pass rusher that you can put across from Bosa. That's ultimately what you're doing. You're trying to make sure that you have guys like Kyler Murray surrounded on both ends. Having pressure from one side doesn't do you any good. But now they have it where they can have pressure from both sides. The Houston Texans obviously weren't pleased with his play over the past few years. They had big hopes for him, but this is a great pick up for the 49ers, and hopefully he can come in immediately and have an impact.
All right, Isaiah, we're going to welcome in our first host of today. Locked On NFL host David Harrison and Cody Rourke are joining us now. Cody, did I say your last name correctly?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Right.
Fantastic.
Nailed it. So I'm 1 for 1 on the day. That's great. David, welcome. We're excited to have you joining us. And the first topic I want to get you guys talking about here is, it's news. It's not trade news, but with the Derrick Henry injury, the Titans adding Adrian Peterson, seasoned veteran. I want you all to kind of talk about what you think this is going to do. Is Adrian Peterson going to be able to at least somewhat fill the role that Derrick Henry did there? David, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, he's a veteran running back, so you always like to see your team go out there and attack a problem. But I mean, he obviously isn't going to bring quite the juice that Derrick Henry is going to present for the Tennessee Titans. He's not going to strike fear in opposing defenses the way that Derrick Henry did. But it gives the Tennessee Titans a veteran addition to the locker room, to the roster, and a somewhat capable running back. I mean, there's a saying that goes, guys who are available at this point in the season are available for a reason. So you're not going to go out there and pick up a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro off the streets, in early November, end of October. So it's probably the best you can do, and it sets them up so that they have an option. They have somebody they can get integrated into their system if they don't pull off some sort of a trade to bring in one of these running backs that might be available.
Cody, what do you think?
Well, looking at Derrick Henry too, it's really hard when you build an offense around one guy to be your primary workhorse. And I think this is the dilemma that we eventually thought the Titans would run into, because he sees so much, right? His volume as a rusher, I mean, he has extensive wear and tear. So it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. And I was always intrigued. How would the Tennessee Titans approach this? Now, I think you go out and you get a guy who's a downhill runner like Adrian Peterson. He's not the AP that we saw back in Minnesota, but I do think that maybe in this system, things can work out for AP. But the question is, you don't want to put all that on Adrian Peterson. Now, the same volume that Derrick Henry was getting, what are you going to do behind a guy like Adrian Peterson as well? I think this is the biggest dilemma that the Titans are in. And kind of like what David had said here, I wonder if they are going to make another move for a running back. And there's some other names that are out there. I mean, Melvin Gordon's name was brought up by the Denver Broncos. I'm not sure that's going to be a move that happens here, but it'd be intriguing to say the least here, considering the Broncos do have Javonte Williams and they also have Mike Boone. So it would have to be the right price. I don't know if Tennessee is done just yet. I'd be very surprised if they weren't.
Isaiah, anything to add?
Yeah, okay. They both just had some very valid points. It's very difficult to come off the couch. Adrian Peterson has had to do that over these past few years. Obviously, stepping in last year with the Lions, he came in and had over 600 yards on, I think, 150 some odd carries and 7 touchdowns. So he was effective. I mean, AP is a physical specimen. He is not your normal running back that's sitting at the house. But to that point, David, I mean, it is very difficult to come off the couch and have an impact. The expectations for him, I'm not sure how high you can really set those. We know how explosive of a runner he has been in the past. But he is, he's up there in age now in terms of running backs. And he also doesn't have the conditioning that everybody else has in terms of having been through OTAs, in terms of being through camp and having these, 6, 7, 8 games underneath his belt. So there's going to be an element that plays a part in it as well. We'll see how they work him into it, but I do like the idea of trying to bring somebody else in to share the workload, because he cannot carry the same workload as Derrick Henry was. He was a workhorse.
I'm going to say, quick thought to everybody just like me that owns Derrick Henry on their fantasy team. So yeah, I did pick up Adrian Peterson though, so we'll see how that goes. Right. All right. I was quick, let me tell you. So we'll get back to some trade news, you guys. You heard us talk about all the trades that have happened so far. What players or moves do you think could still be made? I know the Packers had said yesterday, Matt LaFleur said that there was a high chance that they were going to try to do something at the deadline. Isaiah, why don't you go first here? What are you expecting to see in the last 45 minutes here up until the trade deadline?
Yeah, I don't really expect to see too many other moves. I don't think that there's going to be any big moves in terms of DeShaun Watson. I think obviously we're getting word that that's not going to take place. I think there are some teams that are into running, such as the Dallas Cowboys, that have an opportunity to go out and secure a couple other positions that are kind of glaring weaknesses for them in terms of like the cornerback position. I think that they can go out and secure somebody big with some equity that they have at other positions right now. It'd be a perfect time for that. But in terms of other teams that are really in the running, I'm not sure what additional pieces these teams really need to push them over the edge, aside from what we saw today with Kansas City.
Cody.
Well, I think you make a great point there too, Isaiah. And you mentioned Dallas maybe needing a cornerback. Well, there's one cornerback that could be available on the Denver Broncos. That is a veteran guy in Kyle Fuller. Now, right now, opposite of Trayvon Diggs, who's having a fantastic season, 7 picks so far in the NFL, leads this season. They need some help opposite of him. Anthony Brown is certainly not really, he's struggled. He's had a struggle against veteran guys, and opposing teams are targeting him. They're still targeting Diggs because he's given up some plays through the air, but he's making a lot of plays as well as a defensive back. Kyle Fuller will be an interesting name to watch. Now, right now, not much talk out of Broncos country regarding Kyle Fuller. He wasn't active in the last game against the Washington football team. He saw 0 snaps, but with some of the injuries now piling up in Denver with Bryce Callahan, they may keep Kyle Fuller. But if there's a team out there, we talk about maybe a team like Tampa Bay that needs help in the secondary, Dallas, I'm thinking Indianapolis or San Francisco or Green Bay. Those might be some teams to watch maybe as under the radar type of players in the next 45 minutes if something does change.
All right, David, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Fuller is a name that I have circled on my list as well. And I mean, you even add the Patriots, the Chiefs, potentially the Cardinals to that list. I mean, there are a lot of potential teams that the Denver Broncos could find interested in a guy like Kyle Fuller. And I'm really curious to see if the Houston Texans, we know, like you said, Isaiah, the DeShaun Watson stuff kind of seems to have come down to a simmer, and it looks like it's going to go into the next offseason. But I'm wondering if the Houston Texans don't continue to kind of sell off some pieces. We know Brandon Cooks didn't have the greatest response to Mark Ingram being traded. Maybe he goes to Green Bay. Maybe he goes back to New Orleans. We know the Saints could use some wide receiver help. Phillip Lindsay is running back that obviously, Cody, you're familiar with. Is he going to be put on the move? Maybe he goes and helps a team that might need some running back help. And then, of course, Marlon Mack. I mean, he's another name that's already come up, but Ravens, Chiefs, Niners potentially could look at a guy like him as well. So there's some interesting names. The NFL trade deadline doesn't tend to be as exciting as some other leagues because of a lot of reasons. I think install is a little bit of that as well, but there's still some opportunities out there for some important names to move to some important spots and potentially be a catalyst for teams looking to build their stock into the playoffs or potentially push themselves into playoff contention.
And of course, everybody, if there is any breaking news throughout the show, we will have that for you. David and Cody, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We appreciate the insight.
Thank you.
And everyone, it is Tuesday, and here on Locked On, that's when our NFL rankings get released. Your first look at how the trade deadline has impacted them so far and changed the teams at the top. But first, NFL fans, here is an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. So I'm pretty sure that's most of us. Get Upside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use the promo code TOUCHDOWN and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use the promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents a gallon cash. That's hundreds of dollars a month in cash back. And there is no catch. The cash gets added right back to your account, and you can cash out at any time, free to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Download the free Get Upside app and use promo code Touchdown to get up to 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. Again, that is promo code Touchdown. All right. Well, that's a pretty good deal. They might have me there. They're convincing me now. And I'm Danielle and Bruce with Super Bowl champion, Locked On NFL insider, Isaiah Stanback. We're going to bring back David and Cody. We've got a few more things to talk about, gentlemen. I thought you were off the hook for a second, but you're not. So let's take a look at those power rankings that I was talking about before, and we'll see how the trade deadline has impacted them thus far. And the Rams sit at number 1, obviously acquiring Von Miller. Cody, what do you think about what the Rams were able to acquire? And do you agree with that? Should the Rams be number 1 in these rankings?
It's really tough right now considering that, Green Bay on Thursday Night Football, they knocked off the previous top spot there with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, looking at it as well, I feel like for the Green Bay Packers, for the LA Rams, it's a story, two different stories. You have a high-powered offense with the Rams, Matthew Stafford, and now they add in Von Miller alongside Aaron Donald, and you have Jalen Ramsey in that secondary. I mean, it's a very tough defense unit. So they have balance on both sides of the ball well, which is very necessary. They didn't have that balance last season when they made the playoff run that they did. But outside of that, too, it's tough. I feel like you could swap either of these two teams right here. Obviously, what Aaron Rodgers was able to do on Thursday night without his top target in Devontae Adams, Alan Lazard, and then you lose Robert Tonyan. You're able to make do with Randall Cobb, your old good friend, with 2 touchdown passes to him. You wanted to see a little bit of that. So Aaron Rodgers, I think, does a little bit more with less. But either way, I don't think you could go wrong with either of those two teams at the top spot.
David, what do you think about the Titans at number 8? Are they able to sustain that now that they don't have Derrick Henry?
Yeah, that's the big question. I think if I have to make a prediction, I think the Titans eventually fall out of the top 10. I think that loss of Derrick Henry, like Cody was talking about, that you built your offense around a guy like that, and you're not going to have him. You just can't replace a guy like that. So a lot is going to go on the shoulders of Ryan Tannehill, and I know that he's done a very good job, and they've added some receiving weapons to help him out there. But you kind of wonder, are you going to see maybe a little bit of the Ryan Tannehill that you saw that kind of led to his departure from Miami when he was kind of on the downward slope of his career at that time? But I'm kind of with Cody. I think the rankings overall are pretty good. I mean, if I had to point out a team that maybe is too low, maybe it's the Arizona Cardinals. They fall, all the way from 1 to 6 after losing to the Green Bay Packers in heartbreaking fashion there. I think maybe it took the Cardinals a little while to climb up the boards there the way they did at the beginning of the season. And maybe a lot of people kind of say, oh, no, look, they were who we thought they were. So now let's bring them back down. But I think, the Arizona Cardinals, overall, the rankings are pretty solid, I think. But the Cardinals are probably the one that stands out as probably the lowest. I'd probably put them at 3. So you move the Bills, Cowboys, and Bucs down a notch.
Isaiah, who's too high? Who's too low?
I think the Bills are too high. I honestly think that the top 5 should be a clean sweep. I'm thinking it should be Rams, probably Rams, Cowboys, Packers, Bucs, Cardinals. Throw those guys in there, and then you start getting into the Ravens and those and teams of such. The Buffalo Bills are a highly competitive team, though. Those guys like to bring it on both sides of the ball. So I definitely think that they should be up there in the top 6 or 7. But I can't really stand behind them and say that they should be at the number 3 spot, especially sitting at 5-2.
I have a hot take. I'm just happy that the Lions aren't last as a Detroit sports fan over here. They're winning at something right now, you guys. They are winning at something. Okay, David and Cody, now I am saying goodbye to you. Thank you so much for joining us. It was great chatting with you, and hopefully we get to do this again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. And now we're going to welcome in our Locked On Cardinals host, Bo Brock and Alex Clancy, and then Locked On Rams host, Sosa Kremenjas. Locked On, same thing. How's it going, guys?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're
doing
excited. Well. But no Alex with us today. What do you do, you guys? You ditch us?
I don't know what that guy's up to half the time.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. We've got you two. Most important, it's his fault the Cardinals aren't ranked as high anyway. So anyway, Kyler Murray and Matthew Stafford are both 2 of the top candidates for the MVP this season. Let's start with Kyler Murray since he took the year by storm. Bo, make your case for Kyler right now.
It's simple, Danielle. He's the most electric quarterback to watch this season. He can do it with his arm. He can do it with his legs. The numbers pretty similar as far as what Stafford and Kyler are doing through the air. Then Kyler's kind of taken a step back as far as being a scrambling quarterback, but still found the end zone 3 times. It's all fine and dandy if you can step back in the pocket. It's clean and drop dimes like Stafford has done. But Kyler, he makes watching him an experience. It's unreal. He's transformed this Cardinals franchise. He's taken them from the outhouse to the penthouse. And Stafford has just kind of been the missing piece to that puzzle. Kyler's the most valuable, no doubt about it. And he's raised the Cards game. And we know Stafford without a supporting cast. We've seen that for several years in Detroit. So passing numbers similar, but Kyler, he's tied with Tom Brady as far as the most explosive plays, big plays over 25 yards, 24 this season alone. And he's elevated the Cardinals games when they're close. Kyler, he leads the NFL in completion percentage when it's a tight contest. Stafford 14th. And, when Kyler and the Cards, they battled the Rams the last couple games, the Niners, the Browns, the Packers defense. We saw that on Thursday Night Football, while Stafford's been kind of padding his stats against the Giants, the Lions, the Texans. So I just think that the case is, if you're watching the games each and every week, you see Stafford and the Rams, they're taking on some, bunnies, while Kyler Murray's putting up impressive numbers against some good teams. That's my case for K1.
I like it, but no Lions hate on this show, all right? Like, they're not allowed to be the end of every joke, okay? Alex, thank you for joining us. I see that you have If you heard me say that it was your fault that the Cardinals weren't ranked as high, I'm sorry. Just forget I said that and we'll move on. And so now I'm going to have you make your case for Matthew Stafford, because there is definitely a case.
Yeah, Bo's pretty convincing. I'll say that. We've had some back and forth here. This is the NFC West. I mean, we go back and forth pretty often here, but now that his tirade is over, I think it's Matthew Stafford's award. I mean, this guy has elevated the Rams to the best team in the NFL. You look at the power rankings, the Rams are first for us, and that's no surprise. You look at some of the numbers. Yes, Kyler Murray may have more raw yardage or more raw numbers because the Rams just don't have that many plays on offense because they don't need them. They score very quickly. But when you look at the efficiency metrics, third in yards per attempt, only 2 guys higher than him. And by the way, Kyler is not higher. First in explosive pass percentage, first in EPA per play, first in average yards per play on offense. You're talking about the only team in the NFL that scored 20 plus in every single game. A team that's 7-1. I mean, the Rams are clearly a very good football team. And not just that, right? We're talking about, if Bo's going to say the highlights, this is electric and this and that, that's true. But the Rams, they're also on primetime a little bit more often. That's going to be in the voters' minds. They're on primetime, I think, 5 times this season. They're in those grand lights under SoFi Stadium in LA where everything's a little bit more visible. So I'm going to go with I'm going to go with Matthew Stafford, not Kyler Murray. I think Kyler, you can make the case, right? But I think throughout these next 10 or so games, when we get throughout these games, the Rams are going to be a little bit ahead of the Cardinals. I think Stafford's going to be able to sort of distance himself a little bit, but it is close for sure.
All right, Isaiah, do you think it's Kyler or Matt Stafford, or do you have a different pick? Who do you think is going to take the MVP?
Man, it's tough. It's tough. I am here in Dallas. And there is a gentleman by the name of Dak Prescott.
I thought you were going to say Rush. I might agree with you if it was.
Yeah, no, not so much. So I think Dak has to be in that conversation. I do believe that the 2 gentlemen that we're speaking of right now, Stafford and Kyler Murray, both of those guys are very much so in this talks. If I had to choose between the 2 of them, I'm going to have to go with my man Sosa over there with Stafford, simply because of the fact that I think they have a more balanced offense. Yes, it's not as explosive at that position. Kyler Murray running around and making everybody look like they're in slow motion and playing Madden. But Stafford has a more balanced offense. I like what they're doing over there. They have a lot of weapons over there, and he makes smarter decisions. He has 22 touchdowns versus the 4 interceptions. He's just playing overall just better ball. But to my point, Dak Prescott, even though he's coming off of this game where he didn't suit up, he's a problem. He's a problem. And the offensive weapons that he has are probably the most explosive out of anybody next to Tampa. So I'm going to have to go ahead and say that it's somewhere between Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford, if I had to say right now in the entire NFL.
Ooh, he left Kyler out. Alex, make one more case for Kyler Murray as MVP.
He's doing it with the least experienced coach, I guess you could say. He is not with Matt Stafford. Everything Bo said was right, and that's hard for me to say a lot of the time. Me mirroring what Bo says is something I struggle with. Kyler's ability to elevate his team, in my opinion, is second to none. That's what an MVP does. Matt Stafford is Sean McVay with a better head of hair. He doesn't get to think as much as Kyler does on the field. Sure, Kyler has to anticipate things a little bit more because Cliff Kingsbury isn't as learned as Sean McVay is at this time in his coaching career, but I still think it's Kyler. I mean, if they win 24-21, we're all saying Kyler, right? Over Green Bay Thursday night. So it's 3 points. 1 bad play by AJ Green because they've only played 7 games together. I don't think that's really the reason why you say that Kyler Murray is not the MVP at this point.
All right, guys, we discussed the Locked On NFL rankings a little bit earlier, but obviously we're going to focus on the Cardinals and the Rams a little bit more. The Cardinals sit there at number 6 right now, but what makes you confident in this team for the rest of the season? And I think we discussed that they might be a little low right now. Give us your thoughts on that placing in the rankings.
Their ability to win in every facet of the game. Their offense, we know about it. Kyler Murray, you've got AJ Green, Rondell Moore, DeAndre Hopkins. Just an embarrassment of riches. You just added Zach Ertz to that. They are the counterpart to the Rams on defense with the addition of Von Miller. It's oh my God, look at all these big names, and they show in and show out each and every week. You've got that, and then the Arizona Cardinals this season. Even with J.J. Watt potentially missing the rest of the year, they've got a lot of talent on that defensive side of the football, and you need that to have success late in the season, in the postseason. I think the Arizona Cardinals certainly have that, even with J.J. Watt out potentially with his arm exploding, having pretty much every muscle, every ligament torn against the Texans. But I really do believe in the Arizona Cardinals' ability to win on offense, win on defense, and also in special teams. They've been pretty solid with Matt Prater. He's been a sneaky good addition to this team. Close in games, he's making some clutch kicks and also putting the Cardinals, giving them a little bit of breathing room going into halftime a couple times this season. So that's just, they can do it in every facet. I really believe in this team. The depth, I think Alex can kind of add on top of that. They've got depth at every position. So Cardinals are poised for a deep run this season.
Okay, so Matthew Stafford, obviously we talked about him in his MVP case with the addition of Von Miller, the Rams at the #1 spot in the power rankings. We all like that. I think we could all agree with it. But what stands in the way of the Rams winning a Super Bowl right now?
Yeah, so I think there's probably two things that we're looking at here. First, the inexperience of Matthew Stafford, right? This is a guy that's only been to the playoffs, I want to say twice, 2 games in his career. But at the same time, the Rams have a lot of their leftover from the 2018 team that did go to the playoffs, that did go to the Super Bowl. They've been to the playoffs in 4 out of 5 seasons in Sean McVay's tenure. So, they've got a lot of pieces to make up for it. And I think Stafford, a lot of people knock him for that kind of stuff, but no offense, Daniela, the Detroit Lions, not exactly the best organization when it comes to trying to find sustained success there. So I'm not going to exactly hold that against them. I think the other thing is just really that every other team is going to fight is injuries. I mean, right now the Rams are a really top-heavy roster. We know that. They've got a lot of great players that they rely on, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But in the event that, you lose somebody like an Aaron Donald or a Jalen Ramsey or now a Von Miller, who's going to step up? That's a lot of your defense that you need to really shoulder the load because of everyone around that's just not necessarily subpar talent, but guys that aren't in that elite tier. The Rams do value, going out and getting these veteran superstars and then sort of filling in the rest of their roster with these day 3 picks, undrafted guys like that. So I would think that the injuries are probably the biggest thing, but of course that's not really predictable moving forward.
Isaiah, who is built better? Which team is built better for a deep playoff run? Is it the Cardinals or is it the Rams?
The Rams. Hands down the Rams. They're built better. They have more experience at pretty much every position aside from receiver. These guys are built from. They have a good quarter. They have a really good quarterback. Obviously, that could be controversial between Kyler Murray and Matthew Stafford. But when you start looking at offenses that are equally yoked, you have to turn to the defense side of the ball, and then you have to immediately say who has the most dominant defense. Well, easily the Rams. These guys with the addition that they just had with Von Miller, their defensive front, 3 out of the 4 guys are Pro Bowlers. You got Floyd, you got Aaron Donald, you got Von Miller. Then you go into the secondary. You got Darius Williams on one side. You have Jalen Ramsey on the other side. We recognize that in this league, this is a passing league now, unless you're playing against the Titans prior to this past week. But this is a passing league, and you have to be able to defend guys on the outside. The Rams are built better for that. If teams decide that they want to run the ball, guess what? You need some guys up front to be able to stop the run. The Rams are built for that. This would be a different conversation if J.J. Watt wasn't injured, but unfortunately he is, so I have to give the edge to the Rams.
All right, Bo, Alex, and Sosa, thank you so much for joining us. Great to hear your insight on the Cardinals and the Rams, and both of these teams will definitely be making headlines for the second half of the season, so I'm sure we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you again. And the drama around the Packers this offseason has no impact on their performance. Plus, we are not giving the Bills, or are we not giving the Bills enough credit? We'll discuss that right after this. In life, we're all bound for different things. With beachbound.com vacations, you could be bound for adventure, bound for passion, bound for discovery, or bound for togetherness, bound for immersion, bound for rejuvenation, or maybe bound for encountering the unexpected. Personally, when I'm at a beach resort, I'm bound to end up at the poolside bar or maybe creating my own taco flight. As long as I've got a good view and a good drink in my hand, I'll be as happy as can be. With beachbound.com, you can find the perfect beach vacation for you, no matter where you are looking. What are you bound for? Visit beachbound.com today. All right, alongside Super Bowl champion and Locked On NFL insider Isaiah Stanback, I'm Daniela Bruce, and we talked about the Cardinals and the Rams and what they need to do to continue to be 2 of the top teams in the NFL. What other teams, Isaiah, do you think could stand in their way?
I think obviously you just mentioned the Buffalo Bills. Those guys are always good. They're really competitive, but they have to get better quarterback play out of Ryan Tannehill. He's giving up the ball way too much, and they're not converting enough in the red zone. The Bucs are always going to be a problem, and then the Ravens. You just don't know what you're going to get out of Lamar Jackson. He's a premier elite player. This is a very experienced team with a very experienced coaching staff. These guys have been to the show. They play in these big games, so they're always a threat. But again, you just can't really rest your head on them from week to week.
All right. Well, with that, let's welcome in Peter Bukowski of Locked on Packers and Joe Marino of Locked on Bills. You guys are both here. I love it. Great to see you both. This is exciting. Let's start with the Packers. They are interesting right now. What does their future look like, Peter? And I know Matt LaFleur was addressing the media yesterday. He talked about the fact that his front office was pushing for a big trade at this deadline. We have yet to see one. So what's going on with them?
Well, we got a report earlier today from ESPN. Jeremy Fowler said that the Packers are investigating the tight end market. There are some higher end guys that are available. It doesn't sound like Evan Ingram, who was one of the names mentioned, is going to be on the move. It sounds like the Giants are asking for too much for him. Hayden Hurst was also a name mentioned. And then there's some guys a little bit lower on the totem pole, Jordan Akins and Jacob Hollister, who would come in and just sort of be nice rotational fits for what Green Bay wants to do. I think the thing that maybe is getting lost in all of this, and we love to talk about player acquisition, it's why we're doing this show, but the Packers' biggest player acquisitions the rest of the season are David Bakhtiari, Zadarius Smith, and Jair Alexander. Those are 3 all-pro players, including Devontae Adams. That makes 4, who's going to come off the COVID list here, we hope, at some point. We don't know the timetable on that at this point. And so I think that's going to be how this team is going to make the biggest impact. There is no tight end that they could go out and get that is going to have a bigger impact on this team than someone like David Bakhtiari, Zadarius Smith, Jair Alexander, or any of those guys. This is a 7-1 team that has not had its 3 best players really outside of Aaron Rodgers for a lot of the season. Devontae Adams obviously in that mix too, but it's pretty remarkable what they've been able to do here. It's a testament to Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers and the rest of the leaders on this team.
Isaiah, that was going to be my follow-up for you. Just how much does this speak to the talent of Aaron Rodgers and what he's able to do even when he doesn't have anyone surrounding him?
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely everything. I think Peter would attest to that in terms of, the threat of him not coming back this year. That I'm sure everybody was holding on to the cheeseheads in regards to that. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers is the GOAT. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks and one of the greatest players of all time. He demands that respect. And you see, even in negotiation talks with Devontae Adams, you see how those things kind of transpire in terms of guys that want to be around him. He is a leader. He makes plays. The confidence that guys have, the confidence that guys allude whenever they're on the field with him is substantially different than if Love was to step onto the field. The guys know exactly when he speaks, that just don't second guess it, don't question it. Go there, trust what he says, even if it's not what was installed the previous week. And he is leading these guys to the promised land, 7-1. After all these years of them not giving him the additional help and talent around him that he really requires and should have really demanded, is absolutely amazing. And only imagine if they would have invested into the talent that he really that he deserved.
All right, let's switch over to the Bills. Joe, do they get enough credit, and how far do you think they're going to go this season?
Well, I think the Buffalo Bills can achieve anything they want this year. They're certainly a good enough football team to make a deep postseason run. And in terms of them getting credit or not getting credit, I go back to a quote from Josh Allen this week that he said, "We're not trying to be the best team in the league every week. We just want to be the best team on the field that we're playing on." And along that journey, the Bills have done quite well for themselves. Now they have a 5-2 record, but they lead the NFL in points scored. They lead the NFL in turnover differential. They lead the NFL in scoring efficiency, opponent yards per play, scoring defense. I mean, they are playing really good football. I know that their quality of wins aren't going to impress anybody. This isn't college basketball, though. You don't get to pick your schedule. You play the teams that you're tasked with playing. But to the Bills' credit, they're not just winning football games. They're winning in convincing fashion. I mean, the point differential is not close. I mean, the Bills are handling their business in stacking wins and had a couple of blips on the radar. Week 1 against Pittsburgh. I think we'll ask ourselves all year long, how in the world did the Bills lose that football game? And then, the road game, Monday Night Football against the Tennessee Titans, they came up a yard short. But for the most part, the Bills have handled their business. They're a battle-tested team. They've paid their dues. They've They've been ascending for a few years now, 10-6 3 years ago. Go to the playoffs, lose to Houston last year, getting to the AFC Championship game with a 13-3 record. And now it's time for them to take that next step. And so I think you have to like the makeup of this team, the talent they have, the coaching, the continuity, and the fact that they're battle tested. They've paid their dues. Now it's time to go out there and, take what they think they can earn this year.
Joe, just a follow up on Josh Allen. We've had some conversation about quarterbacks that are in the MVP race, and Matt Stafford, Kyler Murray. We just talked about Aaron Rodgers. Now, I don't know if Josh Allen would be in the MVP race, but can he be discussed in the same category as some of these guys?
Well, right now he's got the best odds to be the NFL MVP. So he's the leading candidate right now. But here's what I'll say about that. The last time the NFL MVP won the Super Bowl was 1999, Kurt Warner. I think the focus here isn't necessarily on Josh Allen convincing people that he's the NFL MVP. It's just being the best quarterback for the Buffalo Bills to make them the best football team that they can be. And because of Josh Allen and his skill set and the weaponry that the Bills have, they're a tough team to defend, and they can attack you in a lot of different ways, and they force you to defend every blade of grass on the field. And so, maybe Josh Allen statistically might not check all the boxes that he did last year, although he's pacing pretty close. I think the point here is to be the best quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, and the NFL MVP talk is great. He's leading the way right now, but at the end of the day, I think this team has different goals than just Josh Allen being the NFL MVP.
Isaiah, Josh Allen's name didn't come up when we were obviously talking Matt Stafford, Kyler Murray, and you even mentioned Dak Prescott on your list. Where does Josh Allen fit in?
He doesn't belong in the top 5 conversation. That's for sure. I mean, he's a great player, but there's a lot of really good players in this league. Unfortunately, he is out of their control. They can't control who's on their schedule. I mean, they don't really have a strong schedule this year. Some of the teams that they've beaten, yes, they're beating them. To Joe's point, they're killing these teams, and they're putting up a lot of points. But they're playing teams that are like the Dolphins and the Texans. I mean, these aren't teams that are just out of this world. Great. So I mean, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Their only job is to show up, play ball, win the ball game, and then hopefully try to position themselves to go on a playoff run with their division. They should, in their strength of schedule, they should be okay. But they have to look over their shoulder because them boys down there in the Patriots are coming.
Peter, it pains me to say this, but we didn't mention Aaron Rodgers in the MVP talk that we had earlier either. And like I said, it pains me as a Lions fan, but if he gets this team to go on a playoff run, he's going to win the NFC North. We know that. But if he gets into the playoffs and he makes a run, I think Aaron Rodgers has a very, very strong case to be the league MVP.
Yeah, you've got the Lions blue on even. I like it.
Represent.
Aaron Rodgers would trade, I think, all 3 of his MVPs for 3 more Super Bowl titles. I mean, there's just no question about it. And I think Tom Brady probably feels the same way. He's got twice as many Super Bowl rings as MVPs, I believe, and I'm sure that is a ratio that most people would prefer in Green Bay. And so, look, if they don't win the MVP, if he doesn't win the MVP this year, but they win the Super Bowl, that is 100% a trade you're going to make. I'm sure Joe would say the same thing about Josh Allen. They want Super Bowls. Tom Brady, same deal. So Aaron Rodgers has not played as well as last year. He is like Patrick Mahomes in that he is a victim of his own success in a lot of these award races. Patrick Mahomes was really good again last year, but he didn't throw 50 touchdowns. It wasn't quite that same just virtuoso performance light the world on fire. And so for Aaron Rodgers, that's coming back. I think this is the most wide open an MVP race has been in a while, because there isn't that superstar quarterback who is lighting it up week in and week out on a team that's going to go 13-4, 14-3, because I don't think the Cardinals are going to be able to do that and sustain that. So it's wide open. It's going to come down. I mean, we're going to be looking at this the last 3 weeks and still going, okay, could it be player X? Could it be player Y? Maybe Rodgers can get into that discussion. If we're looking at awards, the one that I would much rather put forward a Packard for is Coach of the Year. I think Matt LaFleur has done an incredible job this season. You go back to that Thursday night game, for him to completely remake this offense around Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon when they're playing, like Isaiah and me at receiver on Thursday. And they're still able to go to the desert on a short week and get a win without their defensive coordinator, without all of the all-pros that I mentioned. He's on a historic pace to start his career. I don't know why he's not mentioned in that upper echelon of head coaches. And so maybe this is the year that they're able to do that, because Rodgers is not at that, destroyer of worlds level this season.
Isaiah, Peter mentioned that this race is going to be very close, and we're going to be discussing it all the way to the end of the season. If Derrick Henry wasn't injured, are we having this discussion?
I don't think we're having a discussion to the depths that we are. I think that he obviously would be number one, just because of how dominant of a player he is, how much he affects his team. Obviously, with him going down, these guys are scrambling right now, trying to figure things out. And that's unfortunate. They didn't prepare better for something of that case. But, to his point, this race is going to go all the way down to the end. And that's just a testament to how good of a league this is. How many really good players there are in this world and in this league. These quarterbacks are coming to play this year. You got guys, Kyler Murray, who went back and did his homework, and he stepped up and he's becoming a better player. But look at what the general managers did and to put personnel around him. They did a heck of a job with that. You look at the Rams and Matthew Stafford, they did a heck of a job and put personnel around them. Aaron Rodgers is doing this without his general manager or in the personnel really improving. And that's the part that, that I think Peter's really touching base on, is he's doing this without all the additional help. They are reworking the tools that they have. They're working the offense around the personnel that they have and not adding a lot of pieces. They're now down to tight end. Fortunately, I play with Mercedes Lewis, and I know how much of a resource he can be. He's the league's best blocking tight end, hands down. But the man can catch the ball too, as we saw last week, in that one hand almost touchdown.
Joe, one more question for you before we let you guys go. How fun is it that the Bills are better than the Patriots this year?
The Bills are better than the Patriots last year, I'll tell you that. The Bills have won 8 in a row against the AFC East, and so it's a nice shift here in the way things were during that 17-year playoff drought. And, unfortunately, the Bills never got to dethrone Tom Brady while he was in New England, but they certainly have assumed the throne, and not a whole lot of resistance from the rest of that division right now.
Yeah, they definitely look like they are leading with a charge in that division. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate the insight. And of course, we'll check in with you as the season continues. Again, we appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And Isaiah, before we take a break, there has been a new trade. So we've got some news. The Jets are sending tight end Dan Brown to the Chiefs for guard Laurent. Oh my gosh, I am not going to be able to pronounce his name. Duarve Tardif for Tom Pelissero. So the Jets making a splash and trading with the Chiefs here. So it really looks like the Chiefs are trying to make some moves to improve their teams as they head into the second half of the season.
Yeah, no, the Chiefs, obviously we just talked about them a lot in the first part of the show. They're trying to do whatever they can to turn this team around. They need whatever spark they need. As I said, there's just a light switch for them. And once that switch goes off, the whole NFL is going to be trembling because they know what these guys are capable of.
And I apologize. It's Duvernay Tardif that I was trying to pronounce there. Of course, it gets thrown at you pretty fast there. And it was Tom Pelissero reporting that. So, yeah, the Chiefs are just trying to make a splash here. Like we talked about earlier, they definitely need it. And they're going to have to improve if they want to get to the standard that they held for themselves. And Isaiah, you still aren't worried. So I guess I'm going to trust you. I guess I am going to trust you. All right. The Ravens, Steelers, the Bengals. Who is the class of the AFC North? After this, we'll discuss. We're back and better than ever, a new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome back bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus from basketball, football, baseball, postseason, NHL, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all of the amazing offers available for the 2021 seasons. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, everybody, welcome back. Daniela Bruce alongside former Super Bowl champion Isaiah Stanback. And we've talked about some of the best teams around the league, the top teams. And now it's time to look at the next group that belong in this conversation. Isaiah, which team do you believe in most between the Chargers, the Steelers, Bengals, Cowboys, and Ravens? Gave you a lot of choices there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with the Cowboys. I think that they're just built better. I think they're offensively, they're playing lights out. Yeah, obviously Dak coming back off an injury. And then defensively, they have been obviously one of the league's most dominant on that side of the ball in terms of their takeaway. So collectively, I think they're playing great ball. It'll be kind of hard to take them out the mix. The Ravens haven't been consistent. Chargers are starting to they're trying to figure things out. Steelers obviously trying to figure things out. Bengals are coming on strong, but I just don't feel like they have enough experience.
All right, 3 of those teams are all in the same division in the AFC North. So let's start right there. We're joined now by Locked On Steelers host Chris Carter, Locked On Bengals host James Rapien, and then we've got Jake Liskow of Locked On Ravens, right? Yep, there. Oh, I'm sorry. Kevin, you're all here. Okay, we've got the AFC North in the house, all right? We made a switch there, so now I'm a little thrown off, but you're all here. AFC North. Let's start with the Bengals. James, this team has been so fun to watch this season between Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. What other pieces of this team are clicking and making the difference in this season?
Well, up until Sunday against the Jets, it was the defense, and the defense was the bright spot. But I guess Mike White is their kryptonite. But Lou Anarumo's crew has played pretty well, given my expectations, and I think most people's expectations for that unit this year. But they have a lot of questions and a lot to prove, I think, because when you go on the road and you dismantle the Ravens and then you go up to the Meadowlands and you lay an egg like you did, I think a lot of people are like, they're probably phony. And so they have a lot to prove this week against the Browns. But outside of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, this offense has been inconsistent, I think is a fair way to put it, and hasn't reached their full potential. And I think if they do that this week against the Browns, more people will start to buy in, because it is more exciting, like you mentioned, than it's been in recent years. But are they a legitimate playoff contender? It'd be nice if they added another piece in the next 7 minutes. But if they don't, then they're going to have a lot to prove.
Clock is ticking, but it can still happen. Chris, the Steelers have been the standard in the division for a while. Everyone wanted to send Big Ben to the pasture after last season, earlier this season. What are they doing to keep him upright? And they're looking pretty good.
Well, there's been a lot of different changes that we saw, and this is something that I said before the season. Their offensive line was completely new. They let Marquise Pouncey retire. David DeCastro's gone. Alejandro Villanueva's gone. This whole offensive line outside of Chukwuma Okorafor are new guys. And I said early on in the season, it was going to be rough. They were going to have to figure some things out. They were just relying on the quick passing game. The run game couldn't really get going in the first few games. In the first 3 games, they were giving up 11 pressures a game. It was just insane. Like Ben Roethlisberger was just running for his life, and as you can imagine, that's not very fast. But when it comes to the way that they've been able to adjust, they said this group is going to get it together. There's not a first or second round guy here. Kendrick Green, 3rd round rookie playing center. Dan Moore Jr., 4th round rookie playing left tackle. Chukwuma Okorafor, a 4th-year guy. All of them have truly stepped up. Kevin Dotson looking very good. And now you're seeing them start to win in the run game. You're seeing them pushing guys further down the field. And that's starting to give the Steelers a little more, hey, play action is actually a threat this year with the way that Najee Harris is playing and the way that he's being able to get yards and make tacklers miss beyond the line of scrimmage and even behind the line of scrimmage. So it's been finding a balance on the offense. Last year, teams kind of realized after 11 games, wait a second, that team can't run the ball. They're living off the short pass. And when they took that away, the Steelers didn't have an option beyond that. This year, they're starting to learn how to run the ball with this new young group. And I got to say, Kendrick Green especially really looking good after a few weeks, especially in the run game. If they continue to build that and Najee Harris becomes that force in the AFC North as a runner, that's what this team truly needs so that the defense can play as its aggressive self.
All right, Kevin, the Ravens, they have been borderline great for a few years now. How do you see them finishing in this division?
Yeah, I think this is right now their division to lose, but I think the AFC North is one of the best in all of football. I mean, you have a talented team in the Bengals who, really punched the Ravens in the mouth at home and left them kind of, looking for some answers. Pittsburgh, you can never count them out, and Cleveland is very talented as well. But, with the Ravens and their talent right now, they do have some holes. They have to learn to tackle as well. That's pretty big in football. But I think overall, when looking at just the offense and the defense, they have areas to improve. They're also getting back a lot of players. Nick Boyle, who's one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL. Derek Wolfe, who's a really solid defensive lineman who was one of the unsung heroes for them in 2020. They've been dealing with so many injuries this year, and they've shown just how resilient they are, week in and week out. They do have to have a 66-yard field goal and an epic comeback against Indianapolis, but a win is a win. But they've done it in pretty amazing fashion. in some of those games. Now, there is that room to improve, as I talked about, but I think this division is going to come down to the wire, really, because you have 4 really talented teams that all really want to win it this year.
Isaiah, Kevin said it, that this might be one of the best divisions in football this season. Do you agree?
I would have to disagree on that one. I know he's representing this team and the Ravens. I mean, those guys are good, but that's after that it gets a little dicey. I think the NFC West, with those 2 teams at the top, are obviously the strongest in the league right now. With the 49ers still trying to figure things out, but the Rams and the Cardinals, the way how dominant those guys are on the offensive side of the ball, I don't think any team really out there really has an answer for all the weapons that they have. And then defensively, we just saw what the Rams just did with the addition of Von Miller. It's kind of hard to say that division isn't the strongest right now.
James, we've been talking a lot about the MVP race on the show today. Just how close is Jamar Chase to being an MVP caliber player and being in that discussion?
Oh, I mean, until the other day, he was probably their offensive MVP, right? Even though Joe Burrow was putting up big numbers. But I think you're going to see, and the Jets did this, where they just throw coverage over top of them and say someone else is going to beat us deep, if anybody's going to beat us deep. And T. Higgins had a 54-yard grab. But, he's carried the offense. He's been great at the end of halves. He's obviously had, up until Sunday against the Jets, a 34-yard reception or longer in the Bengals' first 7 games, rather. So he's been everything you could imagine from in a rookie and then some. But as far as MVP, I think that's a bit much. And at the same time, if he continues to put up huge numbers, I do think he could run away with the Offensive Rookie of the Year crown.
Chris, the fans in Pittsburgh did try to run Big Ben out of town earlier in the season. What is the plan for the Steelers when Big Ben does decide to hang it up?
Mike Tomlin, from the report of Jay Glazer, Mike Tomlin is looking to get a veteran quarterback in for the future. I don't think he wants to restart everything with a rookie quarterback. The Steelers believe they have a core that can be successful in the NFL. I mean, their defensive core. You look at their key players: T.J. Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Devin Bush, Stephon Tuitt. They have guys that are young. They'll be around for several years. They're either about to sign a big contract or they have signed a big contract. They believe those guys are around, and now you've got Najee Harris, this young offensive line that you think is coming together, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, all these guys that you're not paying a lot of money for. They're like, look, why not strike while the iron is hot? I do see, I had a former Bills GM and Steelers front office guy, Doug Whaley, come on my show on Locked On Steelers just a couple weeks ago, and he said he would not be surprised if the Steelers made a shock the world type of move in the offseason to go get a big name quarterback at the end of the year. But right now, the Steelers, they're doing everything they can to build the run game, to build the defense, and to get strong. They know that Big Ben is limited where he is, but they also know he's probably the best guy to kind of keep things steady right now until they find a better option. If they went out and got a rookie quarterback this season, they might have like a Zach Wilson or someone, and that wouldn't be that much better right now.
We're going to take a look back at our NFL rankings for the week. I want to get the 3 of you to comment on everything that we've seen so far. And Kevin, we'll start with you. Do you like the rankings? Is there anything that you would change?
No, I mean, I think it's fine. I think, if there was one team that could be a bit too low, I think moving the Cardinals down from 1 to 6, maybe a bit too big of an overreaction. But I think, everything here looks pretty good. There are a bunch of talented teams at the top that overall could really make a run at the Super Bowl, both in the AFC and in the NFC. I think, when we get to playoff time, it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree with you there. Chris, what do you think?
I think that James's boys, the Bengals, let me down this weekend. I had a face paint bet on the Locked On NFL podcast with your boy Q. Last week, he bet that the Ravens would beat the Bengals, and that if the Bengals won, he would wear Bengals face paint on the show. So we did. So then he challenged me to do the same thing. So I thought I was being smart, and I said, "Oh, I'll bet that the Bengals will beat the Jets, because of course they'll beat the Jets." Now I'm going to have to wear these stupid face decals on my face on Friday's episode. So thank you, Bengals, and thank you, James, because I blame you, James, because you're the only guy closest to the Bengal here to make me mad about this.
I'm happy they lost now, because now I get to see you wear stickers on your face.
I'm gonna,
this is a win-win.
There's a couple Betty Boop stickers. I don't know how you put Betty Boop in a Jet sticker, but whatever. I'm not wearing a Betty Boop sticker. But in all seriousness, the Bengals have played well. What I was concerned with is something that Isaiah mentioned earlier. There's a lack of, older leadership on the team, and sometimes that can lead to faltering down the stretch. I didn't think it would happen against the Jets. I thought they would smoke them and play even well. I thought that would come in like December. But this is why I said from the beginning, this division is going to be up for grabs. I think all four teams can compete for it. I will agree with Isaiah. The NFC West, the two teams that would be better than all four of the teams in this division. But as far as maybe the most balanced division between the four teams, that's where I think the AFC North would lay claim.
All right, James, we'll wrap it up with you. Another look at those rankings. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm surprised the Bengals didn't fall a little bit more. That was an embarrassing loss, to be honest with you. And I know the Chiefs are struggling, but they won. And so, if you put the Bengals 14, the Chiefs 12, wouldn't shock me. Surprised that the Chargers stay as high as they do after, a couple ugly weeks. That being said, in every week we do these rankings, after the first about 10 teams or so, it gets tough. Like teams 11 through 15, you can kind of swap them in and out. And I think that's what you're noticing here. So it's an 18-week season now, and we'll start to see some of these teams separate. But yeah, I'm surprised the Bengals didn't drop farther.
All right. Thank you, James, Chris, and Kevin, for joining us. We appreciate all of your insight. And I think everyone has their eyes on the AFC North to see what happens in the end here. It's going to be really exciting. Thank you all for joining us. And coming up, it's finally time to let Isaiah talk some Cowboys. He's going to get to that. But first, NFL fans, here's an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. Get Upside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use promo code TOUCHDOWN and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a month in cash back, and there is no catch. The cash back gets added right to your account, and you can cash out at any time to your bank account, PayPal, an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. Again, everybody, that is promo code TOUCHDOWN. All right, Isaiah, I'm going to let you just open it up a little bit and talk about the Cowboys. We already heard a little bit about Dak Prescott, but what's going on in Dallas right now?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Obviously Dak Prescott's coming off of injury where they were kind of taking a precautionary measure with him. I think if this was playoffs last week, you would have saw him in the game. But you had an opportunity where you're in a good position record-wise. You're in a weak division. You could afford to put Cooper Rush in there last week to secure the health and safety of your QB1 and your new $40 million man. So they took care of him last week, and obviously they were able to get the victory. But they also had some losses in that game as well. Obviously with Smith going out over there at the left tackle position, you lost him. You lost a couple other pieces as well. So, but the good news is these guys have help coming. That's the thing about this Dallas Cowboys team, as well as they're playing right now on defensive side of the ball. That's where all the talk is right now, with Dan Quinn coming in and rejuvenating this side, adding some veteran pieces, adding some rookies, a huge rookie class. These guys are all starting to show up and play. But you also have these guys killing it on offense. And then you have guys coming back like Neville Gallimore is going to be coming back on the defensive line. You have Tristan Hill coming back on the defensive line. You have DeMarcus Lawrence coming back on the defensive line. And you have Kelvin Joseph there, their second-round draft pick, who just showed back up this past week and playing on some special teams, but he'll start getting worked in there as well. This team is playing well, but they are loaded with depth, and that's something that's kind of dangerous as other teams get ready to face these guys.
All right. Well, Isaiah, we let you open up. Now let's bring in Locked On Chargers host Daniel Wade and Locked On Cowboys Landon McCool. All right, we're gonna start with the Cowboys here because we just heard Isaiah make their case for them. Landon, what has been going on in Dallas? What are your thoughts on the Cowboys and what they've been able to do so far?
I mean, I kind of want to let Isaiah keep talking, honestly.
know,
Everything
right?
he's saying sounds so good. I think he nailed it. This is a team that is, winning and finding new ways to win each week. And I think, despite not having Dak Prescott against Minnesota, was able to find a win and was able to somehow get a win, advance their chances on trying to get that number 1 seed and get their quarterback an extra week of health. That's an incredible week to have. And I think Isaiah nailed it. We've got guys coming off the bench that are reinforcements, that, a defense that is improving. I think the big thing that is really telling this week is that this defense was able to perform without getting turnovers. And I think that was a huge, huge bonus this week. And it shows a kind of another step, that a defense that we hoped would be average at best, kind of taking steps towards getting above that line and getting to a point where, if they can be an above average defense, if they can succeed and find ways to get off the field on third downs like that without having to get turnovers, this Dallas team has places to go as the season goes on into December and January.
A quick follow-up to that as we enter the second half of the season. Are there any concerns for the Cowboys? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, health. I mean, I think, that like Isaiah said, I think Dak we're assuming is going to be fine to come back and play against Denver this week. But there's Tyron Smith, who has been dealing with, it sounds like, bone spurs in his ankle. I think that the good news for the Cowboys this year, as opposed to previous years, is that health has been mitigated by the depth that Isaiah mentioned. This team has, I mean, you saw all 7 offensive linemen, the starter level offensive linemen they had on the field in that Hulk package. They've got guys that can just come in and step in. And, even if let's say Tyron Smith needs to take a couple weeks off, get some surgery, or just take some time off that ankle, let's get La'el Collins some reps at left tackle. He played it in college. He's comfortable playing on the left side. Suddenly you've got a, better than starter quality tackle who's able to just step in out of nowhere at your left tackle in case Tyron Smith is out. It's the kind of luxury that I just think that the Cowboys have cultivated and finally are being able to take advantage of in a way that they certainly weren't able to last year.
And Daniel, let's start talking about the Chargers, who have had a tough couple of weeks here. Why should they still be considered a contender?
I mean, that's a good question. I would say, Landon, if you got any extra offensive linemen you guys want to send over, I mean, I think, I guess it's a little late now as we're speaking, but
yeah,
it's hard to say at this point. I mean, I think the one thing you would say about the Chargers is they're in an imperfect conference. And when you look at the other teams that are there, the Bills obviously probably look like the most complete team, but I think there's big questions about the rest of the teams in the AFC. You see the Bengals smoke the Ravens and then get beat by the Jets, after the Ravens smoke the Chargers and then get smoked by the Bengals. So there's a lot going on in the AFC right now. I think for the Chargers to be contenders again, though, you have to see Justin Herbert get back to that MVP level that you saw him in the weeks leading up to the last 2 ugly losses for the Chargers, where he looked like a legitimate MVP contender. Mike Williams looked like one of the best receivers in the league. And both of those things have gone, away the last 2 weeks. So Justin Herbert has to get back to that. The Chargers offense has to be high-powered with the flaws they have defensively, and they're going to have to make it work with a patchwork offensive line to make Justin Herbert look more comfortable and look more like the prolific quarterback we saw from him, his rookie season and early to start this year.
Daniel, I think fantasy owners all want to know what the heck happened to Justin Herbert and Mike Williams. And as you're talking about it, they have found success last season. They found success early in this season. What has the difference been?
I mean, the last 2 weeks, they've gone up against creative defensive minds. I mean, Wink Martindale in Baltimore gave Justin Herbert a lot of issues. They disguised a lot. They got pressure. They got a lot of free rushers. And then after the free rushers came in, then you saw Justin Herbert start to speed up his mechanics a little bit. The throws that are usually easy throws for him were going a little bit off target. And I think you saw that again last week against one of, maybe the best defensive mind of all time in Bill Belichick. And that's no excuse. The Chargers offense has too much talent. The game plan has to be better. The wide receivers have to come through on third down instead of dropping passes, instead of having balls tipped up for interceptions. They're not getting these long, productive drives where you're seeing these fantasy players fill up the stat sheet right now. Instead, it's a 3 and out, or they're getting, a touchdown. But there's just way too much feast and famine with this offense. And they just have too much talent there to to have these kind of droughts that they've had in these games. I mean, in the last game, after the Chargers' second touchdown, they went 8 drives where they had 3 points, 2 interceptions, 4 punts, and an end of half situation. The Chargers are way too good for that offensively, and that's just not going to win them games. So I think after seeing the disguises Justin Herbert has faced the last 2 weeks and having a much easier slate of defensive coordinators and defensive minds to go up against here in the next few weeks, he should be able to get back on track. Are they as good as the team that went 4-1? Probably not, but they're definitely nowhere near as bad as the team that's been 0-2 in their last 2 games.
Isaiah, your take on the Chargers, if they do get into the playoffs, are they capable of making a playoff run?
I think that they are. I think that they have a lot of weapons, obviously offensively and defensively as well. They have a all pro guy at every level on that defensive line. Defensive line, they obviously have Bosa. They have Murray at the second level, and they also have Harrison out there in the third level. These guys are a threat. I remember when they played Dallas, it was a concern. But to Daniel's point, Herbert doesn't do good when he has to move his feet. And that's something that they're going to have to shore up. They got to shore things up on the offensive line. I think Dallas actually kind of exploited that with Michael Parsons coming off the edge and really causing him to move his feet and throw on the run. Teams see that. Often these defensive coordinators see those things. They highlight that, and they try to find ways to exploit that one weakness that he has. And until they shore things up, it's going to be kind of hard to find these guys finding their way deep into the playoffs.
All right, Landon, one last question for you about the Cowboys. Is their window closing? We know that they look really good and they could get it done this year, but is that window getting smaller?
They have a lot of questions going into next year. I mean, just because of the contracts that are expiring, they obviously just paid Dak a lot of money. But I think as we've seen with the Rams and a lot of other teams, the contract is just a figment of our imagination. They have ways to figure out the money. They have ways to pay these guys. I think that they've made some choices already, including trading Jalen Smith to make sure that they weren't guaranteed that money, make sure that they could save some money to roll over into next year. I think that they are going to be constantly struggling to fill depth because of the big money at the top of the contracts, but the Cowboys, as well as any team in the league, have been really good at drafting. And as long as they can kind of keep up that pace, they can, refill their coffers with players that can, continue to build and learn. And then as they get guys that go off into free agency, they get more comp picks and then we get more guys. It can be a self-sustaining process, but the whole key to it is to make sure you draft well and you acquire players 365 days a year, as Stephen Jones says.
Isaiah, I'll let you comment on that one too. Does this have to be the year for the Cowboys?
I think it does. I really do. I think the more success you have, the worst case scenario for the Cowboys is that they go deep into the playoffs and don't win a Super Bowl. Reason being, you show everybody how much talent that you have. All these guys get the opportunity, they get the platform, they get the big, the big limelights right in front of them. An area in the world can see exactly how good these guys are. Guys like Cedric Wilson out there making plays. You got guys like Donovan Wilson out there making plays, flying around like crazy. So these guys that are kind of second tier guys that have been in their career, all of a sudden they get that premier showing, and now they're going to want that premier money. And not to say that these guys are going to get, Randy Gregory type money, but these guys are going to be highly touted after it. It's going to be very difficult to replace them. You're going to lose a lot of guys. Gallup's going to come back here in the next week or two. You're most likely, depending on how well he plays, you might lose him. You lose his backup, Wilson. You lose, Randy Gregory is going to demand a ton of money, a ton of it if he keeps playing at this rate. So there's a lot of question marks that are going to next year. The roster is set and the roster is solid this year. They better go out there and get everything that they can while they can.
Well, it looks like they are on pace to do so, guys. Thank you so much, Landon and Daniel, for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it. For more with them, make sure you listen to Locked On Cowboys and Locked On Chargers. We will switch gears and talk Las Vegas Raiders in just a minute. A terrible story from this morning. But first, in life, we're all bound for different things. With beachbound.com vacations, you could be bound for adventure, bound for passion, bound for discovery, or bound for togetherness, bound for immersion, bound for rejuvenation, or maybe bound for encountering the unexpected. Personally, when I'm at a beach resort, I'm bound to end up at the poolside bar and creating my own taco flight. As long as I've got a good view and a drink in my hand, I'll be as happy as can be. With beachbound.com, you can find the perfect beach vacation for you, no matter what you are looking for. What are you bound for? Visit beachbound.com today. All right, I'm back now with former Super Bowl champion Isaiah Stanback, and let's talk a little bit about the Raiders news coming out of this morning. Isaiah, obviously a very, very unfortunate incident, and it really just, you feel for the Raiders right now. They've got a lot going on outside of the football field.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. Obviously, the Raiders have been dealing with a lot organizationally here, but nothing greater than what just took place this morning with Henry Ruggs III, their receiver, who by all reports had a DUI and seemingly ran into the back of somebody on the freeway, which resulted in somebody, obviously that passenger or that driver, fatally passing away. It's very unfortunate. I feel for the family, that individual. There's really we're starting to see these cases too much in terms of DUIs. Not even just in the NFL and athletes, but just in general. We have a lot of resources at our exposure now, disposal. We have Uber, you got Lyft, you have all kinds of different ride services that are at your disclosure, and I pray that guys start utilizing these things so that we don't have to sit up here and talk about these type of stories.
And Isaiah, if there is anything that can come out of this that's positive for the Raiders football team, can this stuff bring a locker room together? Is there a way for them to move forward?
This is difficult. This is really difficult. You think about some years back when the Dallas Cowboys dealt with this, when they lost, when Brent had an accident and lost his teammate. This was something that was very difficult for them to overcome. Obviously, this isn't teammate on teammate, but this is one of their family members. And unfortunately, somebody lost their life. Anytime something like this happens that is this dire, it takes a piece of your team away. Forget football. Forget the fact that that you're going to lose a teammate most likely for the year or even in the future. This is something that everybody has to look internally and find out what decisions am I making with my daily choices. Because this is a perfect example of this is bigger than football.
All right, let's bring in Locked On Raiders host, your boy Q. Q, what can you tell us? What's the latest on the Henry Ruggs situation?
Yeah, it's real sad times here in Las Vegas and dealing with the news of what happened with Henry Ruggs III this morning, and more importantly, what happened with the loss of the life as a result of that car accident. Man, it's just a real big wake up call to everyone to realize, like Isaiah was saying, that there's so many different outlets that you can use, even as an individual, not even an NFL player, but as an individual, which you can do to avoid situations like this. And so here's a young man with his whole life in front of him, and now he's in a crazy situation that has to deal with his life. But then there's also someone who expected to get home, and their family expected them to get home, and they're not coming home. And that's where it's really just a gut punch to the whole community. There's no reason for anyone to lose their life for something that's very avoidable like this. So it's a somber day in Las Vegas in general, because we know someone in our community has lost their life behind something crazy and avoidable like this.
And obviously all of our thoughts and prayers go out to the victim's family and everybody that is having to deal with this. And it's always a tough transition to get back to talking football. But Q, we do want to ask you about the Raiders team in the AFC West. Do you think they are the best team right now, or how will things change as we go into the second half of the season?
That's been the question we've been asking all week, is, hey, all of a sudden the Chargers lose the game against the Patriots, and the Chiefs look like they're battered and bruised, and they're not really the team that you thought they were. And the Raiders had a chance to really make moves, and they're sitting there at 5-2 with a trip to New York to face the Giants, who we just saw on Monday Night Football. There's a lot of things to like about the Raiders as far as their schedule, the way everything's shaping up, the way that they're sitting at 5-2, already overcame adversity that they had to deal with off the field this season when it comes to Coach Gruden. And you just kind of thought that this was a special unit. This is going to be something that's going to be tough to overcome. I've never been in the locker room as far as a player, so I wouldn't know how they're going to be able to come together. I know it's a tight-knit bunch. So, I'm assuming that the leadership there in that locker room is going to try to really work this out. But, man, this is one big time hurdle to try to overcome on many different levels.
Isaiah, this team has already had to overcome a hurdle with John Gruden earlier in the season. How have they been able to rally around each other in the post John Gruden era, I guess we can call it?
Yeah, obviously, when you lose your head coach, you have no choice but to come together or fall apart. And I think what you've seen those guys do is they responded well. They came together. They started playing really, really good ball. They took on that new leadership that they had there with the coach that stepped in. So I think that they responded well to that. Now, to Q's point, this is another hurdle. And this is a different type of hurdle. This is a hurdle of loss, not only from the personnel perspective, but for life, right? So this is a little bit more dire. This is a little bit more serious, obviously a lot more serious. So I'm not sure how these guys are going to respond. But to Q's point, these guys have a great opportunity right now in a division that's not that strong. And they do have, out of these next 4 games, obviously they have the Giants coming up here. They're starting to play competitive ball. I would say 3 out of their next 4 games are very difficult with the Giants on the schedule. They have the Chiefs, they have the Bengals, and then they got the Cowboys. So they have to figure this out really quickly and come together as a unit and go out there and try to put together a professional performance.
Thank you. Derek Carr is obviously going to be a huge part of that, and he has quieted some of the haters this season. So what do you like about Carr so far?
Well, he's really taken that leadership role and that captain of the team role and taking it to another level. It's always the big debate: is Derek Carr the problem or is he part of the solution? And clearly, he is the solution this year. And further, he's just been the guy. He's really taken this team, put him on his back, brought the team together as well, and has shown his skill and his leadership in year 8 now in the league. And he's got an opportunity to be special. In 2016, the last time the Raiders made the playoffs, he was on trajectory to have a great season, was in the MVP conversation until he broke his ankle. But he looks like he's playing better ball than that, and so he really has an opportunity to be a special quarterback and lead a special team that I do believe still is really good. And they have a lot of quality players in there. Again, like Isaiah said, they just got to figure out how they're going to overcome this hurdle, which I've never had to be in this position, so it's hard to try to figure that out and how they're going to do that. Young men, obviously some veterans in the locker room as well. Rich Bisaccia, the interim head coach, he's got a lot on his plate, but from everything I've heard, the players love him, and he's a leader of men. So it's just something else that he's going to have to try to work with and try to get him there. But Derek Carr has been as advertised, if not better.
And obviously, we've talked about it. The biggest concern for this team is going to be getting over the hurdle that they face right now off of the football field. But on the football field, Q, what is the biggest concern for them?
Well, I think that they're still trying to find themselves. Defensively, they played a lot better this season than they have in years past. Gus Bradley has done some great things. I really think it's just overcoming injuries. They have a lot of injuries in the secondary in particular. Trayvon Mullen is still out. So that's something to be concerned about, especially when you look, and I hate to look further down the schedule, but you have the Bengals that have a really good offense. You have the Cowboys. We've seen them up close and personal. They have a really good offense. They're going to need to have all their guys at full strength, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to try to slow down some of these offensive attacks that they're going to be facing. They're the second team right now in the AFC conference. They're in a really good position, but they're going to need all their guys. They're going to need them at full strength if they're going to want to make that special run that is a playoff berth in 2021.
Isaiah, just to wrap it up, what do you like or dislike about the Raiders as we head into the second half of the season?
Yeah, I do like their coaching. Obviously, Gus Bradley does a heck of a job defensively with their schemes. They had a great addition in KJ Wright. The leadership that he brings to that team is second to none. So I like how these guys look on defense, and they're just going to continue to improve on offense. Derek Carr, like you mentioned there, Q, he's improving. He's improving. You like to think of him as a veteran, but he just continues to get better every game. He's continuing to download more information. Every blitz that comes at him, every coverage that steps out there, he's literally just adding that to his arsenal. He's making better decisions and putting these guys in a position to win ball games.
All right, Q, thank you so much for joining us to talk a little Raiders football. We appreciate it, and thank you for all the updates surrounding the Raiders right now.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Everybody check out your boy Q on Locked On Raiders, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And now we've got a new trade to discuss before we move on. Isaiah, the Broncos are sending rookie cornerback Kerry Vincent Jr. to the Eagles for a 2022 6th-round pick. Per sources. The Eagles are a team we haven't really talked much about. They obviously beat my Detroit Lions last weekend. Well, I'm past that by now, but it was an impressive performance from the Eagles. So a move to kind of help them out for the second half.
Yeah, the Eagles have to figure things out in their secondary. These guys are in a division that has a lot of weapons, and you can't really afford to not have the cornerbacks to be able to defend against these guys. So it's a great pickup strategically for them, and that personnel are in a position that they definitely needed to attend to.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about the move that didn't happen. The deadline has come and gone, and the name we all had our eye on is staying put. But first, we're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your #1 spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, baseball postseason, NHL, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all of the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And now, Isaiah, we're going to talk about the news we've all been waiting for, but the news that also didn't happen. DeShaun Watson staying put. Obviously, a lot of drama also surrounding him this season. Are you surprised that nobody wanted to take their chances with Watson?
Not at all. Not at all. With all the uncertainty that's surrounding him in terms of his cases that he has pending against him, or accusations he has pending against him, I think that nobody wanted to get their hands dirty with that. We heard the Dolphins' names involved in a lot of talks, but we also heard the stipulations they had that they wanted all things dismissed prior to the signing. Well, that's not something that they can control. So that deal didn't happen. I personally had Nick Caserio as my general manager when I was playing for the New England Patriots. So I know the type of person he is. He has his heels dug in the ground. And when he has his heels dug in the ground, he is not going to lose a value such as DeShaun Watson for anything less than what he deems that he needs to build his roster up for his success and his organization's success. So I knew on my end that he wasn't going to make a move on this. They will take this all the way into the offseason. And, I'm not sure how those conversations go with the ownership, because they're paying him a lot of money right now not to be on the field.
For more on the situation with DeShaun Watson, let's bring back David Harrison of Locked on Bucs and Cody Rourke of Locked on Broncos. You guys, as I said, it's the biggest story that really didn't happen at the trade deadline. No movement of DeShaun Watson. Cody, I think the front runner maybe in the past few days had been Miami, but they ultimately decide not to make a move for him. What do you think of the situation as a whole and the decision not to go after DeShaun?
Well, it's a tough room to be in if you're in a position of power to try to make a trade, right? For Stephen Ross and the Miami Dolphins, they wanted there to be some conditions on if the fact they were going to trade for DeShaun Watson. They wanted some protection if, in fact, Watson were at some point, obviously, if the conviction were to be handed down, right? Because obviously with 22 pending cases, that was the biggest issue, the biggest obstacle there, because at any given point, if it comes down, the investigation is cleared and they find something, well, DeShaun Watson could either be out of the NFL or suspended long-term. And that right there, you'd lose your draft capital. But Nick Caserio of the Houston Texans was not willing to do that. That was obviously something there. So they'll explore it, but it gives, I think, both teams a little bit more time to figure out where the truth is in the matter. And obviously, I think we've all been kind of sitting here for the last couple of months since the news initially broke, wondering, hey, what's going to happen? It's been very quiet. But, right now, I think it's a good move. I think it's best for any team right now to not make this trade until everything is out there and the truth is out there.
David, your thoughts on the DeShaun Watson no moves, I guess we could say.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Cody. I think this is really the best case scenario for all involved. It allows the court process, whatever there's going to be civil or legal, to take its course. And for the Miami Dolphins, like Cody said, you're not bringing on too much risk. I mean, quarterback trades are always tricky, whether it's trading up in the draft to get a quarterback or just trading a quarterback in general, because they always tend to be a little bit overpriced. And when you have a guy like DeShaun Watson, who on the field looks like a legitimate franchise leader, that the price tag for him is going to be huge, but then you have the risk assessed with it as well. So you're asking somebody to sell a known commodity, not to belittle player value, but that's basically what we're trading here for pennies on the dollar because of the situation they're in. Or you're asking the Miami Dolphins to bring in a player and pay premium price for him without knowing if that player is ever going to actually step on the field for a long-term or be your long-term franchise solution because of what may possibly transpire. So it was one of those situations that neither side is really in a good position. One side was going to have to give way more than I think anybody could expect them to. So as much as we all wanted it to possibly happen, I think this is probably the outcome most of us expected.
Now let's add Cody Davis to the mix here, host of our Locked on Texans. He's got the local perspective on what's going on with DeShaun Watson and why the Texans ultimately weren't able to trade him. Cody, what's going on in Houston?
Man, it's a lot going down here in the city of Houston. As you guys know, trade deadline came and went, and as expected, DeShaun Watson was not traded. And look, Cody and David both hit the nail right on the coffin right now with 22 sexual lawsuits going up against him. There's a lot of uncertainty surrounding DeShaun Watson, and I've been on record by saying that it would be in the Texans' best interest to hold on to DeShaun Watson for right now because, one, it gives DeShaun one, an opportunity to clean up everything that he has going on off the field. And two, it also opened the door for the Houston Texans to get the best trade package out there. Because look, I understand what DeShaun Watson has going on off the field is way serious. But at the end of the day, if you're talking about strictly football, on a bad day, DeShaun Watson is at worst the number 5 quarterback in the entire league. Plus, he's only 26 years old. And how often can you guys look back in history and see a franchise-changing quarterback at 26 years old is open and available for a trade? You could correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that never happened. So, look, Deshaun Watson's on-field value is worth every draft pick, every player that Nick Caserio could potentially get back. However, it's a little bit unfortunate because what he has going on off the field.
And Cody, when you look at the Texans, obviously this year is not going to be their year, but what does their future look like if it's without Deshaun Watson?
At the end of the day, we still don't know, because at the same time, we have a roster that is kind of like, look, Nick Caserio built this roster going into the season where it's like, okay, we have a little hope to be competitive, as we saw when Tyrod Taylor was healthy. Those 6 quarters, the Texans did look like a team that was going to upset quite a few teams. Once Tyrod Taylor went down, you brought in Davis Mills. Now it started to look like all the veteran players that he brought in order to be competitive, that went down the drain. Now you're riding a 7-game losing streak. And prior to the fourth quarter that you had in the loss against the Los Angeles Rams, you went 12 straight quarters without scoring a touchdown. So as of right now, it doesn't look good. And it's kind of hard to say what their future looks like without Deshaun, because Deshaun, at the end of the day, is going to be just as important for the Texans' future, whether or not he ever plays for the organization again, because he holds all the assets that the Texans can bring back regarding young potential players, draft pick, and whatever else Nick Caserio could get out of an opposing team.
Well, Cody, thank you so much for joining us and giving us that local perspective from Locked On Texans. We really appreciate it. And hey, we are wishing them the best down in Houston.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you guys, now the 4 of us, we need to talk a little Bucs, David. We haven't talked about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers all show long. And maybe that's just because we know what they can do. We know all about Tom Brady. We know that they are going to contend again this season. There they are, ranked number 5 on our power rankings. Why don't you start right there? Do you like the number 5 spot for the Bucs?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, Isaiah, I see you're pointing with the Buffalo Bills maybe being a little bit high, but I think with the way the Buccaneers have won some of the games this season, and you know, a lot of that is due to injury. But at the end of the day, you are what you have on the field, and the injuries have happened. They are a fact of the game, and that's something that Todd Bowles, I think, has done a masterful job of handling. I think it's one of the reasons he's going to be one of the hot names this coming offseason when it comes to head coaching jobs. But the bottom line is the Buccaneers defense is the weak part of that team right now, even if it is due to those injuries. Getting guys like Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting back hopefully after the bye or a couple weeks after the bye will certainly help things. But in the meantime, teams know that the way to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is to control the ball, put points on the board, and try to get it to a point where the Buccaneers have to abandon the run game. You look at the recent loss to the New Orleans Saints. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are just allergic to running the football against the New Orleans Saints for whatever reason it is. And give credit to the New Orleans Saints early in the game. Even with Jameis Winston leaving, they were able to put some points together, put some points on the board, and control a little bit of the game. But the Buccaneers went a little pass happy in the second half. They're a little too early, I think, for my taste. And it kind of kept that defense back on the field, and it kind of kept them in a situation they were going to be susceptible to things and trying to match the level of intensity that the Saints brought in a really big divisional matchup. They didn't really approach it the same way that guys like Cam Jordan did, where they come in with that intensity, but they were intense and intelligent. And Isaiah, I know that you can talk about that. Sometimes players, they get too juiced and they make bad plays and they make mistakes because of that adrenaline. I think you saw some of those from Devin White with the flag smacking Trevor Siemian on the helmet. Whether we agree with the nature of the rule in itself, it is a foul. And then, of course, the taunting penalty later on in the game. Things that you can't do, but things that emotions will kind of let a young guy like Devin White do. Those are things that teams are kind of looking to hone in on, and that's the way you're going to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because you can't count on getting 3 turnovers from Tom Brady week in, week out. And as happy as the Saints defense is to have those 3 takeaways coming out of this weekend, trust me, in the organization, they know as well the next time they see Tom Brady, they can't count on those 3 takeaways either. They've got to be able to find weaknesses in the defense, and right now it's in the secondary because of those injuries.
Isaiah, do you have anything to add to that? I know that we could talk about some of the penalties and the plays that the teams are making that gets emotional when players are out there. So can you add to that aspect of things for the Bucs?
Yeah, everything that you just brought up is correctable, right? All those things are correctable. All those things can be watched on film. Decisions that can be made. They can be had to be better. I've been in a meeting room. I've been in the locker room. I've been on the field with TB12 after a loss, and I can tell you this: he will not make those mistakes again. It was a little bit different when he was making these mistakes last year, when it was the beginning of the season, because he didn't understand who he was playing with. Timing was off. Personnel was different for him. It's a little bit different this time around. He has another ring under his belt with these guys. He brought all 22 starters back. These guys are going to shore this thing up. You talked about Todd Bowles on the defensive side of the ball. These guys still, once these guys are perfectly healthy, these guys have all the weapons in the world. He has all the schemes to make sure that they put these other defenses down. Richard Sherman's still getting his legs up underneath them. There's a lot of guys that can contribute on that side of the ball, and we know what they can do offensively. So I feel really good about the Bucs. I think any team that steps on the field with them has to respect them, not only from their players and personnel standpoint, but also from their coordinator aspect.
And Cody, the Broncos just lost their defensive quarterback, so to speak, in Von Miller. What does their second half of the season look like without him?
Well, it's going to be tough because Vaughn was really a franchise cornerstone piece of that defense, right? They have a couple other guys too. Justin Simmons is becoming that for the Broncos organization. But for Von Miller, you're losing a very effective and elite pass rusher that when you try to run the ball to his side, you just can't do it because he's so disciplined at squeezing down the edge of the line of scrimmage. But then you can't just focus a one-on-one effort in trying to block him in pass protection because of the fact that he's got all these moves in his pass rush ability, the spin move, the dip. He's got the long arm, and he does those things really well. So I think the biggest issue for the Broncos, even with Vaughn there this season, Vaughn has been seeing so much more attention in Denver from tackles, from tight ends and running back chips that the other pass rushers opposite him have not been getting home. And I think that's where it kind of skews, I think, the perspective of Vaughn. The Broncos were better with Von Miller, don't get me wrong. But, without him, they have to really figure out what their identity is from a pass rush perspective. Bradley Chubb is set to return in the next few weeks for the Broncos, more than likely after the bye week. But you really have to wonder about these other guys. Malik Reed, who had 2 sacks against the Washington football team last Sunday, he stepped up in a big way. Opposite of him, you have his 7th-round draft pick from Ohio State and Jonathan Cooper, who's super impressive. Then George Paton goes out and he acquires Stephen Weatherly, a veteran outside linebacker from the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, the relationship and the ties that he has there, it kind of binds there. He comes up big with the sack. So you want to maybe do a little bit more now, right? You're going to get more contribution. We talk about a running back by committee approach for offense as well. You have to go a by committee approach, I think, on the defensive side of the ball to replace the impact that Von Miller had at pass rusher specifically. And luckily on the back end, they got guys like Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson were playing really well. And at cornerback, Patrick Surtain II has been playing phenomenal for them, their 1st-round draft selection. So I think for the Broncos, the biggest key, the defense is starting to get things pieced back together. They're starting to get healthy. They lost a couple guys now with Bryce Callahan. But more importantly, the offense has to be the better part in the second half of the season for this team. And look, Von Miller's not going to impact that, but that's an area they have to get better at.
Isaiah, some of the things that Von Miller may impact, he's a leader on the field. He's a leader off the field, emotionally, physically. What happens to a locker room when you lose a guy like that to a trade or being injured or anything like that?
Yeah, you're not just losing a guy, you're losing a Hall of Famer, right? And you're losing somebody who has been a part of that organization his entire career. I don't know how you fill that void. I don't think that's a void that you feel. I think that's somebody that's somebody's got to step up. Not only either it's a leader that's already present or somebody who's been submerged as a leader. They're going to have to let those characteristics come out of outside of themselves and really step into that role. I don't think you replace the play nor the leadership of a Von Miller. But John Elway is their general manager, and he will find a way to ensure that the guys are in position, that the leadership within that locker room really comes to fruition, simply because you recognize how great of a player and how great of a person Von Miller is.
Yeah. And David, when we look at the Bucs a little bit more, I know I'm already halfway through the season. I'm already thinking Super Bowl, but hey, how can you blame me? Are the Bucs going back? Can they do it again?
They can do it again. There's obviously competition. The Los Angeles Rams just keep finding ways to get better and better. And that trade to me was quite shocking, but it makes a lot of sense for what they're trying to do. And I think that's kind of something we've had to engage with Bucs fans about it, with the way the teams approach kind of building teams. You see the Los Angeles Rams, we've been talking about it with Sosa and throughout this episode alone, going all out to get that championship. At the end of the day, you're willing to kind of sell off draft capital and do things that are necessary to get the championship, because that's what you're here for. That's what Bruce Arians came out of retirement for. He didn't come out of retirement to develop a quarterback in the sense that a guy like Jameis Winston really probably needed. Jameis needed a good 3-4 years of training, of mentoring, of development still. And Bruce Arians doesn't have that kind of time. That's why you saw them move away from Jameis and move towards a guy like Tom Brady. And everybody says it, when you have Tom Brady on the field, you have a chance. It doesn't matter how many points you're down by. It doesn't matter how many turnovers. It doesn't matter if you have 11 penalties and 100 yards of penalty yards against you on the road in a divisional matchup. You still have a chance. And to that aspect, you even saw in that Saints loss, they still had a chance all the way up until that pick six. It was pointed out to me by a Saints fan that a pick six is what done in the Buccaneers against the Saints, when we've seen that happen so many times before with these two teams. But whether or not they get there is honestly, it's not even going to be a matter of injuries, I think. And that's kind of the amazing thing, is with all the injuries they've suffered, Isaiah, like you were talking about, Todd Bowles has a full weaponry of things at his disposal and ideas and creations that he's even yet to come up with on his own that'll probably surprise him in week 14, week 15 of the NFL season. It's going to be a matter of the team just kind of sticking together and playing discipline. And that's what Bruce Arians talked to the media about on Monday when he was asked about what the team needs to address the most heading into the bye week. And it was a one-word answer: is discipline. And that's perfect, because when you look at the games that they struggle in, you go back to the New England Patriots game involved, there's an uptick in penalties in a lot of these games. But then you go to the Chicago Bears game, and a lot of people are going to kind of look at the competition level and probably point there. But the Buccaneers also only had one penalty except against Chicago Bears. So there's a big difference in disciplined play and undisciplined play. And these younger guys, the guys like Devin White, the Jordan Whiteheads on the roster, are going to learn that. They're going to continue to learn that. Last year, it was the Kansas City Chiefs game right around that point where they really kind of had the light bulb moment come on. They really kind of dug in, dedicated themselves to playing disciplined football, staying within the scheme, doing what they're coached and trained to do. A lot of people are wondering if this game is going to be that one for the 2021 season. It could be, but honestly, I still think this team has a little ways to go. I think you're still going to see some down moments, some mistakes, some mental errors that are maybe a little uncharacteristic of a team that you would expect returning all of their Super Bowl champion starters. But that's what you have when you have so many young pieces, and you're going to see veterans like Ndamukong Suh, who on the sideline in that game against New Orleans Saints kind of rallied up the troops and kind of try to get that defense going back in the same direction. You're going to see that leadership come out, whether they've got a C on their chest or not. There's a lot of leaders in that locker room. And I think when you have that, you have the potential to win, whether it's Pierre Desir playing cornerback on the field or it's Carlton Davis.
All right, I know we're bouncing around a little bit here, but I want to take the three of you and your fabulous insight back to the AFC North. We have not talked about the Cleveland Browns much on this show. Cody, start us off. What do you think about the dynamic with Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham Jr., and rumors flying about maybe a Mayfield move coming? That obviously didn't happen, but what's going on in Cleveland right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when you have LeBron James coming out saying free OBJ, you know something is not right there. And we know LeBron James, he's a Cleveland Browns fan. I mean, he sports, so it's kind of taking a shot, like LeBron's taking a shot now at Baker Mayfield in a sense. We had his father out there posting videos of him not throwing the ball to OBJ. And here's the biggest thing. I think that there's a little bit of turmoil right now in the Cleveland Browns locker room, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But when you look at all the talent that they have, you always have to ask the question, what is it exactly? Is it guys just not happy that they're not getting the touches? We have to keep in mind, OBJ has been coming off of an injury. He's not fully 100%. He's been trying to go out there, but also same thing with Baker Mayfield. You could tell last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he wasn't 100%. And I think a lot of it too, as he continues to play with a torn labrum in his left shoulder. And I heard that there's a fracture there as well. Understand, even if you're a right-handed quarterback, you still need your left side in order to have a neutral base. And so it does impact his mechanics a little bit. I think that there's a frustration there on that side of things, but you hope it can resolve itself. The biggest concern I have for Baker, if he takes a shot on the right side, lands on his left again, how much more damage can he do to his shoulder, right? I feel like, in my opinion, if I were Baker, I would cut the cord on the season. I'd get surgery. I'd prepare for next year, because guess what? It will leverage you in contract talks. And if you play bad throughout this time, it could impact you in a negative way, especially as Lamar Jackson looks to get paid. I don't know what's going on in Cleveland right now, but it's not looking good.
Isaiah, I want to ask you specifically about OBJ really quick to wrap up the Cleveland talk. But you mentioned he wants out of Cleveland, right? Or he says he wants out of Cleveland. LeBron's tweeting about it, all this stuff. He kind of did a similar thing in New York. And this is no knock on OBJ, because we know the talent that he has, right? But what's going on there? Is it just the fact that he's not getting enough touches? He's not being used the way that he wants to be used, and he wants to play somewhere that will?
I can't speak on that. What I can say is, you just mentioned his history. When history repeats itself, there tends to be a question mark in terms of what's the constant, right? What's the constant variable there? And that seems to be OBJ. I'm not sure what's going on in that locker room. Obviously, Cody just spoke on it. There's a lot. I think there's a lack of leadership on that team. I think there's a lot of eyes and not enough we's. And it seems to be something that's been following this team for the past few years. You got everything from OBJ's dad talking to, LeBron just magically. LeBron doesn't just tweet about anything. So I'm sure, I don't know how he got the word to spread that out there like that, but somebody was in his ear to say, hey, go ahead and throw this out there on just to happen to be the trade deadline day. So, there's a little bit of motivation there, but it's not good. In terms of Baker Mayfield, I've had 3 left shoulder surgeries myself, and I know it's a pain in the butt to play with. And yes, as a former quarterback, you do need that, to create velocity and things of that nature. I think he'll be okay. I think as competitive as this division is right now, is as bad as they're playing, they still have a chance, right? They're 1 game really out of first place still in this division, which is crazy to say. They got 4 wins. Pittsburgh has 5. So, they're sitting right there. There's a chance. These guys just have to figure this thing out, because we know what these guys can do when they get this ground game going, but they have to mend whatever's going on in that locker room. And I think OBJ just has to put his head down and just grit it out.
The Philadelphia Eagles making a late trade deadline move. We've got Gino Camilleri of Locked on Eagles. Gino, a late move, like I said, what does this mean for the Eagles? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it?
Well, literally right before this, Ross said, do you want to join the show to talk about the trade with the Chiefs? And then I said, we didn't make a trade with the Chiefs, Ross. And then I said, Howie Roseman disappointed us once again, leaving us here, sitting all day on our phones, trying to figure out what they're going to do. The speculation with Fletcher Cox was there all day. It turns out that they don't move him. But then at the buzzer, they get another young cornerback, which they have tended to do here in the past couple weeks in that Zach Ertz trade. They trade for Tay Gowan from the Arizona Cardinals, who actually had a few good snaps in last week's game. I think what this move for Vincent really means is that cornerback is where they have to get better this offseason. And instead of waiting around for the draft, they're looking at guys that they already did their homework on in 2021 in that draft. He was taken, this is Kerry Vincent, was taken 3 picks after Patrick Johnson, who is their Sam linebacker. He was taken just about 13 picks after they took Tay Gowan, who then they took Jacoby Stevens for because Tay Gowan's was already picked. So they have all of these guys who they have all this information on, and a team like Denver, who Cody knows has just an abundance of corner help. We're sitting here in Philadelphia trying to keep our heads above water outside of Darius Slay, and with the future of Steven Nelson most likely going to be on his way out after this 1 year. You only drafted Zach McPherson last year. You now add Tay Gowan. You now add Kerry Vincent Jr. You had Mac McCain, who's another young player. It seems like this youth movement at the defensive backfield is finally coming to fruition, because these Band-Aids, it just seems like they couldn't cover up all the leaks, and they're finally figuring out, yeah, we have to get guys that can run. We have to have guys that were track athletes. Kerry Vincent ran a 4.39 at one point during the testing, and now you're going to have guys that keep up in this modern NFL in a division where you look at Dallas, 3-4 guys. I mean, Cedric Wilson's your 4th best receiver right now, and he's playing through the charts. The Eagles don't have that many guys that can cover, but now with this youth movement, they're on their way to getting on the right track.
Cody, your reaction to the late trade, and what is your reaction to that youth movement that Gino was just talking about? How will that help the Eagles in the second half of the season?
Yeah, when the Broncos drafted Kerry Vincent Jr. initially, they liked the fact that he's got speed to add to the mix a little bit. Now, throughout training camp, he dealt with a couple of soft tissue injuries, and then when he got into the preseason action, he actually had a couple of impressive, reps, especially on the special team side. So he can help out as a gunner on punt, on kickoff, whatever you need him to do. He can be a plug-and-play guy. Has been inactive for the Broncos throughout this season, but the reason this move makes sense for Denver, they already have some guys coming back off of injured reserve, cornerback Michael Ojemudia and cornerback Asang Bass, who was an undrafted rookie free agent that made the 53 last year and was really impressive before tearing his ACL last season late against the Kansas City Chiefs. They're coming back, and Duke Dawson is as well. So there is a premium need for them, those guys that already know Vic Fangio's defensive scheme, versus Kerry Vincent, who doesn't really know it yet. And obviously the Broncos have some good relationships with the Philadelphia Eagles. This was an easy move. And as Gino mentioned earlier, Mac McCain was somebody that the Broncos were very high on early on, but the Eagles stole him off the practice squad. So it was one of those situations there. So So I think that Kerry Vincent will add a little bit of a dynamic in terms of speed for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's going to definitely need some on-field experience, though, before he can grow to become one of those premier cornerbacks that you're going to see.
All right. Well, we're getting close to the end of our show here. I can't believe it's already been 2 hours. We're coming up on 5 o'clock. But hey, Gino, why don't you stick around with us for this one? We're going to talk about what team will be the most interesting to watch in the second half of the season. So let's go around.
I'm here for it.
All right. Isaiah, go first.
The most interesting to watch. I'm kind of biased. I'm gonna stick with Dallas. I'm gonna stick with Dallas. I know. But I just think that this is a team that is really playing a hot hand right now. And I mean, to the points we spoke on earlier, they're not at full speed. They're not at full steam. They still have 3 or 4 guys that are going to contribute in a big way to this team. And I don't think there's any other teams in this league that can really say that they have 4 premier guys, impact players that have not played yet, that are going to be that are yet to even step on the field for this team.
All right, David, your turn. Most interesting to watch.
Yeah, I'm going between the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams just because the Cardinals is like, is it pretender? Are you contender? Is it for real? You know, we've seen teams have or second half of the season collapses before and kind of get exposed for some of the things they did. But I'm going to go with the Rams. I just think all the pieces, Matt Stafford as a quarterback that looking at the Washington football team, who I also cover for the network, that was a guy that I really wanted them to kind of pursue. They did actually have some talks to potentially get a trade there with the Detroit Lions. Obviously, it didn't work out, and he ends up in a much better situation anyway. A Tampa product, so he's kind of connected to the Buccaneers in that sense as well. So interesting to see what he does. And then you love Aaron Donald getting help on the defensive side of the ball, and with Sean McVay, and just seeing a franchise kind of just go for it, right? I mean, we've seen teams go for it and kind of make these splash trades to really get key pieces, but I don't know if we've ever seen a franchise, or if I've ever seen a franchise go for it the way that the Los Angeles Rams have. Because I mean, if this doesn't work, they're pretty much going to clean house. They're going to have to, because they don't have any capital to rebuild, right? So I applaud them for the boldness. Again, watching the Bucs win a Super Bowl in Raymond James Stadium, the Rams trying to be the second consecutive team to do that and win a Super Bowl in their home stadium there in SoFi. It would be an amazing thing to see. So I think if I have to pick between those two, I'm going to go with Rams there, just because of all the pieces they have. It's going to be entertaining to watch them go down the stretch.
All right, Gino, who are you watching in the second half?
I'll switch over to the AFC. I think New England is getting hot right now, and I think they have the potential with their schedule coming up, with the way Mac Jones has looked in that offense, and then just Bill Belichick continuing to do Bill Belichick things with his backfield, making it impossible to game plan for that offense at times. It seems the defense is really coming into their own, and then with the news of Derrick Henry, the Chiefs being what they are right now, the Bills they have yet to be a defense that's over 25th in scoring defense in the NFL. So there's so much going on in the AFC that you look at Bill Belichick and he's starting to churn out wins. You say, okay, if he has a quarterback that can just do enough to win games and not lose his team a game like Cam Newton started to do in that Buffalo game in particular last year, fumbles running into the end zone, that really changes their season around. If Mac Jones and that offense continues to churn out wins, that middle ground of the AFC, there is a lot of headway that can be made there. And I think New England is a dark horse team.
I like it. You always have to keep your eye on Bill Belichick's team, of course. And then Cody, wrap it up for us. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to keep my eye on the Kansas City Chiefs here. And the reason why is when we've looked at their schedule so far, it's been really surprising to see them play and struggle, especially defensively, the way that they have been. I mean, they love to put Daniel Sorensen in man coverage, which everyone's trying to figure out why. But looking at it from the standpoint for the second half of the season, you look at all the games now, most of their opponents either have a 500 record right now or above 500. They have winning records. It's going to get tougher as well, especially when they start to play other teams like the Raiders, when they play teams like the Chargers again. The schedule is going to be a little bit more challenging for them. I'm really eager to see how they respond, because you can't play this level of football the way that you have been. And last night, even against the New York Giants, they were missing out on so many opportunities. And Peyton Manning said it best on the Manning cast, which is fantastic, by the way. He said Patrick Mahomes has gotten away with rolling out extended plays and then throwing across his body, and somehow guys are coming down with it. But defenses are tightening up a little bit, and it's really how the defensive front is playing them and the second level guys are. So the formula is kind of out there on how to maybe limit. I don't think you can necessarily stop Patrick Mahomes, but you can limit him if you force him to throw those turnovers. So for me, I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be intriguing, especially as you have the Raiders and the Chargers above them right now in divisional standings, and both those teams are rolling. So it's going to be really hard to see how the Chiefs maybe try to get back to the postseason, especially at the pace that they're playing right now.
as a Lions fan and a Matt Stafford fan, I'm always watching the Rams. I have been all season, so I'm excited for them and everything that they're building over there. But I also want to add the Packers in there, as much as I really don't like the Packers being our NFC North division rivals. But Aaron Rodgers is putting together a great season, and it's underrated just because of the fact that he doesn't have much around him. So I think that it's very interesting to see what he's going to do and how far he can actually take this team. Gino, we are going to let you go now. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate the inside info.
I appreciate all the time, and fly Eagles fly.
All right. All right. So now, guys, why don't we talk about some teams that are currently sitting in first place? We're going to look at right now, those teams are the Bills, the Ravens, the Titans, Raiders, Cowboys, Packers, Bucs, Cardinals. You got all that. Hopefully you guys have like memories that can hold all of that information. Okay, so first place teams. Which of those teams will miss the playoffs? That's the question. Isaiah, what do you think?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I'm going to go ahead and go with the Raiders. I think the Raiders are going to end up falling. Obviously, they're a strong team, but I think the Chargers are going to figure out a way to turn it on. And you know how I feel about Kansas City. I think they're just a light switch away from the offensive line, figuring things out, starting to have some continuity. And Patrick Mahomes really shoring things up in terms of his decision-making. Once those guys get confidence, watch out. I just don't think that the Raiders have the firepower to keep up with either one of those teams.
All right, David, what do you think?
I was gonna go Raiders. I think if I have to go a different direction, I'm gonna have to go Cardinals, and it's just like I said, it's just that contender or pretender, stigma, and I think that's why you see them drop from number 1 all the way down to number 6 in our power rankings on the network. Is just people aren't sold yet that the Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray specifically are for real. And as teams get more and more film and kind of learn more and more of the tendencies of what they like to do, and you never know, the injury bug is always waiting to creep up and bite people. So if that kind of stuff happens, you're already playing in a very tough division there in the NFC West. And Russell Wilson coming back to Seattle Seahawks, if and whenever that happens, is obviously going to have a role to play with what happens there in the NFC West. So if I can't go Raiders, I'm going to go Arizona Cardinals, because the Colts, I think they've already shown that they don't have what it takes to unseat the Titans right now.
It's crazy with that NFC West division. There's just 3 really good teams there. And obviously Seattle's going to be better once Russell Wilson gets back. And to think one of them is going to miss the playoffs is just, it's interesting. But Cody, go ahead. What do you think?
Well, I just know that our Locked On NFL DM is going to be popping with Alex and Bo after hearing you there, David. It's going to be fun. But, I think for me, looking at everything, and I know that the consensus may not be there, but I'm going to go with the Tennessee Titans here. And the reason why is the biggest question around their offense being Derrick Henry is the workforce of that. I don't know if AP is going to come in and replicate that to the success that Derrick Henry can. I mean, there's a lot of questions, a lot of variables. But what we've seen from the Tennessee Titans, especially them going a little bit more shotgun than they have been the play action, which Ryan Tannehill's been very effective on. That's a question. Obviously, the inconsistencies in terms of health of Julio Jones, he's dealing with some soft tissue injuries here and there. AJ Brown continues to be impressive. But for me, the biggest question could be if, in fact, that their offense struggles without Derrick Henry. We know that they're already depleted in the secondary as is in Tennessee. You have to wonder if they start dropping a couple games and Indianapolis starts creeping back up in that division. I know they're 3 games down right now. You really have to wonder about how that can go. And I think that right now the Colts are probably in a good position watching Tennessee, but they got to take care of their own business. Carson Wentz has to be better, has to be more consistent. You can't be throwing a pick 6 on the 1-yard line to a cornerback trying to get the ball out. You're going to have to try to throw that ball away, live to see another day. But I'm going to go with the Tennessee Titans probably out of everybody in the AFC.
Okay, well, no one said the Ravens, which I don't know if I'm shocked or not, but I think that might be my pick. Just the interest going on in the AFC North right now. Pittsburgh's picking up some steam. You've got Cleveland, who they have some issues, but they're not a bad team. And then, of course, you've got the Bengals, too, who have put together some great strings of football here. So, Isaiah, Ravens aren't in your thought process at all? Because I think they might be the team that falls.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very competitive division. I mentioned earlier that they're 1 game back. I think I said Pittsburgh. I meant to say Baltimore, but they're just 1 game up on all these other teams for the most part. And it's highly competitive. You never know what you're going to get out of those guys. They've had a ton of injuries. They've seemingly overcome them, but can they withstand it for the remainder of the season? I'm not sure. Those other teams are, like I said, they're young and they're upcoming, especially that Cincinnati team. They're very intriguing.
All right, we just have a couple of minutes left, so we're going to wrap it up with, of course, give me your Super Bowl champion, guys. David, start us off.
I gotta go Bucs until I see otherwise. I'm going Bucs.
All right, Cody, where are you going?
I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Rams. I got to support Von Miller. I think that they're loaded on offense. They're loaded on defense. If they can all stay healthy, they have the best shot right now, I think, of making it to the postseason, to the big dance, and winning it.
All right, Isaiah, don't say the Cowboys. I'm just kidding.
No, I'm going with Tampa as well. If Tampa can stay healthy, I don't see how anybody can unseat them. They just have too many weapons on both sides of the ball.
All right, I like it, but I'm going to go Rams too, just because number one, Matt Stafford, always rooting for him. And hey, they've got to do it this year because as we mentioned, they don't have a first round, second round, a third round pick in the next draft. So they definitely need to do it. Well, you guys, it's been fun. Thank you all so much for joining us. And of course, everybody that was watching today, we really appreciate it. This has been the Locked On NFL Trade Deadline Special. To stay up to date on the latest around the NFL, hit the subscribe button on the Locked On NFL YouTube page and get all of your local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts, Locked On, your team every day. Thanks, guys.